Chapter 907. It's fine. Yixian smiled and said, I didn't expect to meet you in the 10,000 Swords Villa either. At this moment, Luo suddenly smiled and asked, Senior Brother One, did you find anything here? No, we've encountered many sword puppets since we entered, but I did get a map of the 10,000 Swords Villa. Wen Kong shook his head and took out a map and handed it to Yixian. Yixian also understood that Wen Kong and the other two didn't believe them. Even if they found something, Wen Kong would say no. After receiving the map, Yixian quickly copied it into the Devouring system. In the 10,000 Swords Villa, other than the forging pavilion, the sword purification pool, and the residential area, there was also a place called the Sword Tomb. Are all the good things in the 10,000 Swords Villa in the Sword Tomb? Yixian couldn't help but ask. That's right, I think so too. Wen Kong nodded and said, Junior Brother Yi, Junior Sister Luo, the people from Juyin Palace might have entered the 10,000 Swords Villa. It's very dangerous for you to wander outside. Why don't you join us? We can take care of each other. Just now, Yixian and Luo had helped them a lot, so this favor had to be returned. Hearing this, Yixian and Luo looked at each other. Then the former nodded and said, Okay, then we'll have to trouble you, Senior Brother One. You two are Elder Hanming's new disciples, and your aptitudes are so good. If you encounter the people from Juyin Palace, then the Burning Sun Hall will suffer a great loss, Wen Kong said. The man in black and the woman in white didn't object and nodded. Therefore, Yixian and Luo joined Wen Kang's team to explore the 10,000 Swords Villa. After obtaining the map, they went straight to the Sword Tomb. The Sword Tomb, as the name suggested, should be the place where the experts of the 10,000 Swords Villa died and were buried. However, when Yixian and the others arrived at the Sword Tomb, they found that wasn't the case. The Sword Tomb, which was full of broken swords, turned out to be a sword tomb. At the same time, there was a strange formation around the Sword Tomb. Young Master, look over there. Luo suddenly pointed at a place. Yixian, Wen Kong, and the others followed her finger and saw a long sword flying through the air. Someone's there. The woman in white said subconsciously, No, that's a broken sword. No one would use a broken sword. The sharp-eyed Wen Kong shook his head and said, This sword tomb should be a defective product forged by the 10,000 Swords Villa. It's said that the flying sword technique of Absolute Yin Palace came from the 10,000 Sword Villa. The fact that this broken sword is flying in the air doesn't necessarily mean that it's being controlled by someone. It could also be a sword formation, said the black-clothed man. A sword array was a type of array formation. The 8 desolate wind-killing array that Yixian had once used could also be considered a sword array. However, what surprised Wen Kong and the others was that Luo actually called Yixian young master. However, they didn't think too much about it. After all, a fox girl like Luo was often sold as a slave. Luo should have been bought by Yixian and joined the Hall of Burning Sun together. Yixian used his eye of revelation and said, There are quite a few broken swords flying in the air. If we step into this sword formation, I'm afraid we'll be attacked by them. That's right. However, since we're already here, we naturally have to go in and take a look. There should be quite a few people before us. We can't let them get the treasures first. Wen Kong nodded. Immediately, the 5 of them stepped into the Sword Tomb. The Sword Tomb was rather dark, so they had no choice but to use their sword rays to open a path. However, Yixian, who had the Eye of Revelation and the Eye of Perception, didn't need to. Senior Brother One, there are 2 broken swords coming from your left. The 5 of them had just stepped into the Sword Tomb when Yixian warned them. Wen Kong and the others were a little surprised because they didn't hear anything. However, they soon believed that there really were 3 broken swords coming from the left. Whoosh! 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 Wen Kong quickly slashed 3 times with his sword and knocked down the 3 broken swords. However, the 3 broken swords continued to fly over after being knocked away for a while. They know how to follow us. This is troublesome. Yixian's expression darkened. He only saw a strange energy enveloping the 3 broken swords. The sound of the 3 broken swords piercing through the air was very soft. In addition to the darkness of the Sword Tomb, ordinary people would have a hard time discovering them. However, this was a piece of cake for Yixian. Although these 3 broken swords are annoying, their attack power isn't high. I'll just keep an eye on them. The man in black said. Alright. When Kong nodded. This team of 5 was led by him. The woman in white was on the right, Yixian and Luo were on the left, and the man in black was at the back. After advancing for a while, 2 more broken swords attacked them. However, at this time, the 3 broken swords chasing behind them suddenly turned around. I see. The broken swords also have a range. As long as we leave that range, the broken swords will fly back on their own, Wen Kong said. Yixian and the others also realized this. Since that was the case, it was simple. The 3 broken swords shrunk to 2. However, it didn't take long for them to realize that this wasn't so simple. The difficulty didn't decrease because the number of broken swords decreased. Instead, it increased. In this sword formation, the deeper we go, the faster the speed of the broken swords, and the stronger the attack power. Yixian narrowed his eyes. He guessed that the others had also realized this. They could still handle the current situation. However, in the next moment they heard a clear sound. Oh no, it's the sword-shaped puppets. Stop! Wen Kong, who was running in front, suddenly stopped in his tracks. Yixian and the others also stopped when they heard this. Yixian scanned the surroundings with his eye of revelation. He didn't find anything around them. This sound was coming from very far away. Rumble! As expected, someone was fighting the sword-shaped puppets ahead. Senior Brother One, should we go over? The man in black asked. Let's go and take a look. Wen Kong nodded. They had seen how powerful the sword-shaped puppets were. The weakest of the sword-shaped puppets was at the early stage of the Supreme Being realm. Moreover, their defensive power was amazing. If Wen Kong wasn't at the middle stage of the Supreme Being realm, they wouldn't have been able to make it this far. However, since someone was fighting the sword-shaped puppets, they could go and take a look. If it was the people from Juyin Palace, then they could take advantage of the situation. When they got closer, they realized that it wasn't the people from Juyin Palace but the group from before. Enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. Wen Kong snorted. They attacked us just now. This is a good chance for revenge. The man in black responded. At this moment, the 7 warriors were fighting the 2 sword-shaped puppets. Chapter 908. Let's go. Wen Kong let out a low roar and led the charge. At this moment, the 7 of them were fighting the 2 peak 8th supreme sword-shaped puppets. It was a good opportunity for them to make a move. Luo, let's go too. After Yixian said that to Luo, he directly charged over. This time he didn't intend to hold back and directly threw out 3 flying swords. Among Wen Kang's trio, the lady in white also knew how to control 2 flying swords. Otherwise, Yixian wouldn't have taken them out. With the support of 3 flying swords, Yixian's battle prowess at least doubled. It was more than enough to deal with an early 8th supreme. Of course, the Eye of the Void was not used for the time being. This was Yixian's trump card. If he used it, the other party would be on guard in the future. In an instant, Wen Kang's group of 5 quickly entered the battle. Damn it, it's you guys! The middle-aged man in the lead shouted. These 2 peak 8th supreme sword-shaped puppets were already enough to deal with. Now that Wen Kang's group of 5 had charged in, this was going to be troublesome. Boom! 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 Amidst a series of explosions, one of them suddenly fell to the ground and his head was thrown into the air. The one who killed him wasn't Wen Kang's trio, nor was it Yixian. It was actually Luo. Hee. Even if I don't use the demon fox flash, I'm still very strong. Luo giggled and twisted her waist. Yixian's heart trembled. He had to work harder, otherwise he would be left behind by Luo again. If that happened, he would be in for a tragedy. Originally, the other party had 4 early 8th supreme. Now that one of them had died, there were only 3 left. Just now they had escaped. This time Yixian wouldn't let them leave so easily. Bang! Under Yixian's all-out attack, an early 8th supreme was pierced through by a flying sword. Immediately after, Yixian slashed with his sword and directly cut off his opponent's head. At the same time, the white-clothed woman and the black-clothed man each killed one of them. Now, only the 3 mid-stage Supreme Being experts were left. 2 of them were being held back by the 2 sword-shaped puppets, while the third was fighting Wen Kong. Previously, Wen Kong was already able to fight 1 against 3. Now that it was 1-on-1, he was able to defeat his opponent in the blink of an eye and kill his opponent in less than 10 rounds. At this moment there were only 2 enemies left. Go! The two of them looked at each other, then turned around and fled. Chase! Wen Kong would not let go of this opportunity to beat a dog while it was down. Unfortunately, the two sword-shaped puppets suddenly turned around and attacked him. Damn it! Wen Kong cursed angrily. It seemed that he was going to fail again. However, at this moment, two flashes of light suddenly flashed past. Demon Fox Flash. Eye of Nirvana. Two cold rays of light flashed past. The two mid-stage supreme martial artists who were running away seemed to have sensed something. When they turned their heads to look, their eyes widened. These two attacks were Yi Xian's and Luoluo's trump cards. In order to achieve a breakthrough, Yi Xian was going all out. Rip! Rip! Two crisp sounds rang out. The two mid-stage supreme martial artists who were running away at full speed had their heads chopped off one after another. Hee. 2 universe rings are in my hands. Luoluo giggled. She kept the universe rings on the two corpses, then quickly returned. Out of the 7 people, Wen Kong, the black-clothed man, and the white-clothed woman each killed one opponent. However, Yi Xian and Luoluo each killed 2 opponents, and 2 of them were mid-stage supreme martial artists. One must know that Yi Xian and Luoluo were only mid-stage supreme martial artists. This was an entire realm above them. Where did these 2 people come from? When Wen Kong and the other 2 saw this scene, they could not help but shudder. If Yi Xian and Luoluo had used these 2 attacks to attack them, they were afraid that, gulp, the 3 of them swallowed their saliva. However, they believed that Yi Xian and Luoluo were from the Burning Sun Hall. After all, if they had attacked them, apart from Wen Kong, the black-clothed man and white-clothed woman would have died. At this moment, Luoluo had already handed over all the universe rings to Yi Xian. Ding, the host has achieved a breakthrough. Currently, the host is at the peak of the 7th supreme martial artist. After obtaining 4 universe rings, Yi Xian finally heard the system notification. This was also the reason why he had used the Eye of Nirvana. As long as he achieved a breakthrough, his strength would increase by leaps and bounds. Even if the Eye of Nirvana was exposed, it would not matter. As for the remaining items, Yi Xian directly gave them to Luoluo. However, Luoluo could not refine them here. Junior brother Yi, come over and deal with these 2 sword-shaped puppets. Wen Kong shouted at Yi Xian. When Yi Xian and Luoluo were chasing after the 2, Wen Kong and the other 2 were holding back the 2 puppets at the peak of the 8th supreme martial artist level. They did not have many people, so it was a little difficult. However, with the addition of Yi Xian and Luoluo, the pressure was reduced by a lot. I'll hold them back first. You guys go and destroy one of the sword-shaped puppets. Wen Kong shouted. Understood. Yi Xian and the other 3 nodded. The sword-shaped puppets were 2 meters tall and held large swords in their hands. Their attacks were very ferocious and were enough to seriously injure any mid-stage 8th supreme martial artist. However, the Burning Sun Hall mainly cultivated the golden body of sovereigns in their physique, so they were much faster than the Yin Palace. Even the black-clothed man could dodge the attacks of the sword-shaped puppets. Boom! 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 Yi Xian and the other 3's attacks all landed on the sword-shaped puppet. Unfortunately, his 70% sword intent was unable to break the armor of the sword-shaped puppet. However, what surprised Yi Xian was that Luoluo could do it. 80% claw intent? Yi Xian raised his eyebrows. I just had a breakthrough. Luoluo's voice directly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. Yi Xian became more and more interested in Luoluo's bloodline. What kind of bloodline did Luoluo have? What was that tuft of golden tail hair? Since Yi Xian's attacks could not hurt the sword-shaped puppet at the peak of the 8th supreme martial artist, he acted as bait and attracted the attacks of the sword-shaped puppet, while Luoluo and the other 2 were responsible for attacking. In less than 10 seconds, the sword-shaped puppet at the peak of the 8th supreme martial artist was defeated by the 4 of them. Then it was Wen Kang's turn. Wen Kang's strength was indeed not bad. When Yi Xian and the other 3 had interfered, his sword-shaped puppet was already full of wounds. With Wen Kang's strength, defeating this sword-shaped puppet alone was not a problem. Soon both sword-shaped puppets were destroyed. When the second sword-shaped puppet fell, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Now Wen Kong and the other 2 dared not underestimate Yi Xian and Luoluo. I didn't expect junior brother Yi and junior sister Luoluo to be so strong. Now, even if we encounter the Yin Palace's team, we won't have to be afraid. Wen Kong said. Chapter 909. Yi Xian and Luo Luo could only laugh dryly. Those two moves were their trump cards. If they didn't use them, they might not be as strong as Wen Kong. Of course, now that Yi Xian had broken through to the 7th Supreme Being peak, his strength was above the other two. He should be able to fight Wen Kong. Alright, let's continue on our way. After Wen Kong finished speaking, he continued to walk deeper into the sword tomb. They had already encountered a 8th Supreme Being peak sword-shaped puppet before reaching the depths. If they continued, would they encounter a 9th Supreme Being? However, since they were already here, it was impossible for them to go back the way they came. Sword-shaped stone. There might be a sword-shaped stone in this sword tomb. If they obtained it and successfully brought it back to the Burning Sun Palace, the Burning Sun Palace would definitely reward them handsomely. Yi Xian and the others continued on their way. Following that, they encountered many flying broken swords. However, compared to the sword-shaped puppets, these broken swords were much less dangerous. The sword tomb was very dark. Everyone used their sword energy to open a path. However, half an hour after they entered the sword tomb, a ray of light suddenly entered their eyes. There's a golden light in front. Wen Kong said in a low voice. Yi Xian immediately used his eye of revelation to scan the area. However, the golden light was too far away, and he couldn't clearly see what the source of the light was. They quickened their pace. As they continued to go deeper, the surrounding environment began to change. The number of broken swords on the ground suddenly increased. Along the way, Yi Xian and Luo Luo had been collecting these broken swords. After all, they were considered forging materials. However, when they reached this place, they were shocked. The ground was filled with broken swords. This was a sea of swords. The countless broken swords made Yi Xian's eyes light up. However, Yi Xian's attention was attracted by the golden light in front of them. It was a huge golden sword that was at least 100 meters tall. This huge golden sword was inserted into the roof of a golden palace. Beside this golden palace, there were a few figures. Be careful, don't go there. Wen Kong stopped and said, there are experts from the Yin Palace there. At this time, they had not completely walked out of the shadow. Moreover, they were still far away, so the group beside the golden palace did not notice them. Yi Xian quickly scanned the area with his eye of revelation. There were more than 10 people outside the golden palace, and all of them had powerful auras. After all, those who could make it here were not weaklings. However, Yi Xian found a familiar figure in the crowd. Li Teng. Sure enough, Li Teng was a spy sent by the Yinju Palace. After he sent the portrait out, he returned to the Yinju Palace. The one with the folding fan in his hand is Ma Cheng, who is ranked 5th in the Juyin Palace. He is a peak 8th Supreme Martial Artist. In addition, there are 3 mid-stage Supreme Martial Artists around. They are very strong. Wen Kong narrowed his eyes and said softly, 8th Supreme Martial Artist peak. This was the strength of the top disciples of Absolute Yin Palace and Burning Sun Hall. Although Wen Kong was strong, he still couldn't challenge Ma Cheng. After all, the other party was also an elite. Senior Brother One, what should we do? The woman in white asked in a low voice. Let's take a look first. That thing should be in the Golden Palace. However, the team from the Juyin Palace didn't seem to find a way to enter the palace. Wen Kong replied. Yi Xian continued to observe. However, his eye of revelation couldn't break into the palace. He also wanted that sword-shaped stone, but he only needed to record it. He didn't care who got the stone in the end. However, looking at the current situation, it would not be so easy to obtain the sword-shaped stone. The group from the Yinju Palace was his biggest obstacle. If I was an 8th Tribulation Supreme Martial Artist, I would be qualified to fight with those people. Unfortunately, I'm only at the peak of 7th Supreme Martial Artist. I haven't even reached the level of Tribulation Transcendence yet. Yi Xian was helpless. He was only one realm away, so he definitely couldn't fight Ma Cheng head-on. As for the other 3 mid-stage Supreme Martial Artists, Yi Xian didn't care about them at all. Rumble. At this moment, a loud rumbling sound came from the front. Yi Xian and the other 4 people looked over and found that the golden sword suddenly fell down. What? Yi Xian was a little surprised. Why did the golden sword suddenly fall down? He observed for a moment and found that the group of people also looked flustered. Obviously, they didn't expect this result. The speed of the golden sword falling down was very slow. However, as it tilted, the roof of the palace began to crack. Soon after, countless golden swords flew out from inside. The golden light that filled the sky frightened Yi Xian and the other 4 people. After the golden swords flew out, they directly attacked the team from the Juyin Palace. Thousands of long swords dancing in the air scared the group of people out of their wits. Attack quickly! The white-clothed youth Ma Cheng, who was holding a folding fan, immediately shouted. After seeing this scene, he didn't dare to be negligent. He quickly took out a long sword and started to attack crazily. At the same time, he quickly retreated. The storm of thousands of golden swords flew toward the team from the Juyin Palace. Not only that, hundreds of swords flew in all directions. There were even 200 to 300 swords that flew toward Yi Xian. We've been discovered. Let's go. When Kang's expression changed greatly. The golden swords were so strange and didn't look simple. Yi Xian and the other 4 people retreated and attacked at the same time. Fortunately, the golden swords weren't very strong. It was unknown whether it was because there were too many of them or because they were too far away. Each of Yi Xian's attacks could knock down several golden swords. In less than 5 seconds, the hundreds of golden swords all fell to the ground. At that moment, Yi Xian rushed over and picked up a golden sword. Luo watched Yi Xian put away the golden swords and said curiously, "Wow, you can put them away?" Yi Xian also didn't expect that the golden swords could be put away. Moreover, the quality of the golden swords was very good. They were all upper-grade sovereign divine weapons. If he could put away all of the nearly 2,000 golden swords, he might be able to pass the tribulation. "Junior brother Yi, let's go and take a look." At that moment, when Kong suddenly shouted. Then, he rushed toward the Golden Palace with the other 2 people. The storm of golden swords was mainly attracted by the team from the Juyin Palace. Hundreds of golden swords left the team and flew in other directions. There were probably other people hiding in the surroundings. With the Juyin Palace as bait, this was a good opportunity to enter the Golden Palace. However, when Kong approached the Golden Palace, thousands of golden swords flew out from inside. When Kong was depressed, he didn't expect there to be so many golden swords inside. However, these golden swords couldn't stop him. "Senior brother one will block them for you. You go in." Chapter 9-10. Although there were many golden swords, they would fall when they were hit by a heavy blow. They couldn't fly back up and hurt people, so they were easier to deal with. However, someone had already done so before when Kong. Ma Cheng from the Yin Palace had cut through all obstacles and entered the Golden Palace. Not only that, but another figure also dashed out from the darkness and rushed in as well. Because this figure had rushed out from the opposite side of Yi Xian, even Yi Xian, who had the Eye of Revelation, couldn't see through the Golden Palace. Therefore, he didn't notice such an expert. Yi Xian didn't go in because he felt that he couldn't win against Ma Cheng. Therefore, he and Luo had been waiting outside to collect the golden swords. "Young master, I have another 100 here." Luo threw her own interspatial ring to Yi Xian. Yi Xian took the golden swords inside and threw the interspatial ring back. At this moment, there were more than 3,000 golden swords flying outside. If Yi Xian were to obtain all of them, he would definitely be able to raise his cultivation to the level of tribulation. At that time, he would be able to obtain Ma Cheng's sword-shaped stone. Yi Xian was even more relieved to see that his 2 senior brothers and sisters weren't interested in the golden swords. They were only responsible for knocking down the golden swords. As for the golden swords that were knocked down, they were naturally collected by Yi Xian and Luo. Yi Xian's cultivation started to improve rapidly. It's too slow to collect the golden swords. At this moment, Yi Xian's eyes suddenly flashed and fell on the group of people in the distance. Instead of collecting the golden swords, it was better to kill people. Li Tong took the opportunity to escape because his clone was in danger. He didn't expect to appear here. Now Yi Xian was going to kill him. "Young master, I'll go too." Luo suddenly shouted. "Together, kill without mercy," Yi Xian said. "Okay." At this moment, Yi Xian and Luo charged over. Although there were 3 mid-stage supreme martial artist experts in that group of people, the rest were nothing to be afraid of. At this moment, Li Tong, who was mixed in the crowd, also noticed Yi Xian. His body trembled as he said in shock, "Why is this kid here?" That day, he had been beaten up by Yixian to the point where he couldn't even fight back. He still remembered this grudge in his heart. Senior brothers and sisters, that brat is the new super genius of the Burning Sun Hall. Please kill him. Li Teng immediately shouted. Leave the Burning Sun Hall to me. Hearing this, an expert from the Absolute Yin Palace at the early stage of the sovereign level shouted loudly before charging towards Yixian. The elites of the Absolute Yin Palace could basically control 2 flying swords. Furthermore, they were proficient in illusions and mental attacks. Their strength was not weak. Yixian was still closing in, but he already felt a piercing pain in his head. This was the other party using a mental attack. You can and so can I. Yixian's eyes flickered as he used the Burning Eye and the Eye of Illusion. He was only 1 level away from the other party. In addition, his Heavenly Eye bloodline had advanced twice. Even if the other party had mental resistance, his battle strength would be reduced by 10 to 20%. Swish! Swish! 2 flying swords attacked Yixian. At this moment, Eye of Nirvana! A silver light suddenly appeared and directly crossed the distance of 10,000 meters, instantly cutting off the other party's head. Not only that, the Eye of Nirvana also passed by him and directly killed the enemy team. Swish! 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 A series of crisp sounds rang out. Yixian's Eye of Nirvana directly killed close to 10 people. However, Li Teng was barely hanging on by a thread. Hit him! Yixian's eyes flickered again. This time he used the Eye of Control and the target was Li Teng. At this moment, Li Teng was at the same level as Yixian and was instantly controlled. Immediately, he attacked a middle-stage supreme martial artist from Juyin Palace. Whoosh whoosh! The sound of wind suddenly appeared. Before the woman from Juyin Palace could react, she was struck by Li Teng's sword that contained 75% sword intent and flew out. What? The other 2 people were shocked. As a spy from Juyin Palace in Burning Sun Hall, why would Li Teng suddenly attack his own people? Could it be that he was a double agent? Immediately, another senior sister from Juyin Palace directly attacked Li Teng. Swish! Li Teng's head was directly cut off, and he died instantly. He probably would never have thought that he would die in the hands of his own people. At this moment, there were only 3 middle-stage supreme martial artists from Juyin Palace left in this group, and one of them was injured. Young master, it's my turn. Luo Luo suddenly turned into a flash of lightning and flew towards the injured woman from Juyin Palace. Even Yixian couldn't react to this speed. Demon Fox Flash. Swish! The woman from Juyin Palace who was injured by Li Teng couldn't react in time, and was directly cut in half by Luo Luo's flash. However, she didn't die immediately. Soul-splitting claw. Luo Luo hurriedly added another claw and scratched the woman's throat. Blood immediately spurted out. You little bitch, go to hell. The other woman was furious and attacked Luo Luo. Bam! This attack that contained 80% sword intent directly hit Luo Luo's body, and directly cut her in half. However, Yixian wasn't worried at all because the one who was hit by the attack just now was only Luo Luo's clone. The real Luo Luo didn't actually go over, and the one who used Demon Fox Flash just now was also her clone. Luo Luo's Demon Fox clone is not bad, but unfortunately it will collapse after 1 second. Yixian's eyes lit up. The Demon Fox clone could only live for 1 second, so after the clone used Demon Fox Flash to kill the enemy, it would collapse automatically even if it wasn't attacked. Now it was 2 against 2. Junior Sister Chan. When the man from Juyin Palace saw his beloved die, his eyes immediately turned red. At this moment, he no longer blocked the golden swords and directly attacked Yixian. You're courting death, Eye of Nirvana. Yixian's eyes flashed again, and a silver slash broke through the air. The Eye of Nirvana's attack power was extremely strong, and was at least equivalent to 85% sword intent. When Yixian, who was at the peak of 7th Supreme, used the Eye of Nirvana, it was enough to threaten a peak 8th Supreme. Swoosh! Rip! This expert from Juyin Palace couldn't block it and was instantly beheaded. However, after using the Eye of Nirvana, Yixian's eyes were directly blinded. This was because he had exhausted too much of his eye power. However, Yixian wasn't afraid because he still had the Eye of Perception. Not only that, but his clone also directly broke through the void and instantly arrived. Yixian's original body and clone shared the devouring space, but they didn't share eye power. After the clone arrived, it directly merged with Yixian's original body, and its strength was directly increased by 10%. Eye of Nirvana. After fusing together, Yixian used his strongest attack on the last woman in the middle stage of the End Palace. Chapter 9:11. The silver slash pierced through the air. The woman couldn't block the attack and was killed immediately. After using the Eye of Nirvana and the Eye of Void 3 times in a row, even if he recovered some of his eye power after fusing with them, it wasn't enough. As a result, Yixian went blind again. Luoluo, hurry up and get the items. Yixian hurriedly said to Luoluo. Luoluo had already rushed over and handed the interspatial rings of the corpses to Yixian. After obtaining so many interspatial rings, he immediately devoured the items inside. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough. Not enough. The blind Yixian shook his head and cloned again to attack the storm of golden swords. With the Eye of Perception, he could continue to fight even if he lost his sight. At the same time, his eye power was slowly recovering. On the other side, the black-clothed man and the white-clothed woman were shocked. Yixian and Luoluo had joined forces and killed more than 10 experts of the Palace. Even they could only look up to such strength. No, even if Wen Kong was here, he wouldn't be able to block that silver slash. Yixian and Luoluo kept striking down the golden swords while collecting them. Yixian's cultivation increased little by little. Just a little more and I can pass the tribulation. Yixian's eyes shone brightly even though he hadn't regained his sight yet. 100 swords. 200 swords. 300 swords. Yixian kept devouring the golden swords. His cultivation was about to reach the peak of the 7th Tribulation Supreme. After he had swallowed a total of 1,000 golden swords, the system's melodious notification finally rang out. Ding! The host has met the tribulation requirements. The current success rate is 98%. The system notified. 98%. It was very close to 100%. However, Yixian still had a clone beside him. Ding! The current success rate is 100%. Begin the tribulation. After Yixian merged with his clone, he directly began to receive the 8th level of the Sovereign Tribulation. Perhaps only he had the courage to pass the tribulation under such circumstances. What? Junior brother Yi is going to pass the tribulation? The black-clothed man was shocked. After all, this was the first time he saw Yixian. However, at that time, Yixian was only a mid-stage 7th Tribulation Supreme. Now he had grown to such a level. Moreover, he dared to pass the tribulation here. He was simply courting death. There were still thousands of golden swords hovering in the sky. At that moment he moved closer to Yixian, preparing to protect Yixian. Even though Yi was surrounded by Luoluo, Yixian couldn't make any mistakes. However, in the next moment his footsteps stopped. What surprised him was that Yixian, who was in the middle of his tribulation, was actually able to retaliate. When other people passed the tribulation, they had to use all their strength to resist it. They couldn't afford to be distracted. However, Yixian was not only passing the tribulation, but also defending himself against the golden swords around him. This was an extremely dangerous situation. Boom! 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 3 consecutive bolts of tribulation lightning struck down. Each bolt was stronger than the previous one, but Yixian didn't care at all. He easily passed through 5 bolts of tribulation lightning. But at that moment, boom! Suddenly, a loud sound attracted everyone's attention. This wasn't the sound of tribulation lightning striking down. Instead, it came from the Golden Palace. An explosion suddenly resounded from the Golden Palace, and then a figure flashed out from within it. It was Ma Cheng. Behind Ma Cheng were 2 people. One was Wen Kong, and the other was a middle-aged man that Yixian had never seen before. Wen Kong was currently working with the middle-aged man to kill Ma Cheng. Junior brother, the sword-shaped stone is with Ma Cheng. Wen Kong immediately yelled. Yixian's body trembled. As expected, there was a sword-shaped stone. Although he was still passing the tribulation, he had to take action for the sake of the sword-shaped stone. After Ma Cheng came out and saw that his team of Juyin Palace had been killed, he was furious. When his eyes fell on Yixian, a silver slash flashed across Yixian's eyes. Whoosh! The nirvanic slash pierced through the sky. Ma Cheng was stunned for a moment. He hurriedly raised his hand to attack. Bang! Ma Cheng's attack, which was infused with 85% of sword essence, collided with the nirvanic slash. However, to his surprise, his attack was slightly weaker. Whoosh! The nirvanic slash destroyed Ma Cheng's attack and attacked him. However, as an elite disciple of Juyin Palace, Ma Cheng wasn't easy to deal with. Bang! Bang! Two crisp sounds were heard. The two flying swords controlled by Ma Cheng had destroyed the nirvanic slash. Boom! At the same time, Yi Xian's sixth tribulation lightning struck down. What? He's breaking through? Ma Cheng, Wen Kong, and the middle-aged man were shocked. How could a person who was passing the tribulation unleash such a powerful attack? The sixth tribulation lightning struck Yi Xian's head, causing the genuine qi in his body to expand. Brat, you're courting death. Ma Cheng's eyes turned red. A genius like Yi Xian must be killed in the cradle. Whoosh! Another sword radiance swept towards Yi Xian. However, the sword radiance destroyed Yi Xian's afterimage. Yi Xian's original body had already run far away. Not only could a person who was passing the tribulation attack, but he could also run away. Was he a freak? Bastard, how dare you interrupt young master's tribulation? Luoluo shouted angrily. In the next moment, the fur on her tail and ears turned golden. That's... Yi Xian's eyes flickered. He saw Luoluo's tail suddenly flash. It was that tuft of golden fur. Luoluo, who had turned into a golden fox, suddenly experienced a surge in her aura. She met Ma Cheng's sword radiance head-on and actually destroyed it with a single claw. Heavens, when did Luoluo's attack power become so strong? Yi Xian was shocked. He felt that he couldn't see through Luoluo anymore. Luoluo's 3 fox demon flashes had been used up. But now Luoluo had turned from a white fox to a golden fox. Her battle prowess had skyrocketed to the point where she could fight Ma Cheng. Terrifying. Boom! Another bolt of sovereign tribulation lightning descended from the sky. This was the 7th bolt of sovereign tribulation lightning. Yi Xian was only 1 bolt away from becoming an 8th tribulation sovereign. At the same time, Luoluo had already blocked Ma Cheng's path. Claw shadows and sword radiance filled the sky. Ma Cheng, who was being held back by Luoluo, was instantly caught up by Wen Kong and the middle-aged man. Give me that sword-shaped stone. My imperial family will reward you handsomely. The middle-aged man suddenly shouted. Now the surrounding people finally knew his identity. He was from the imperial family of the royal sacred dynasty. Humph, don't even think about it. Chapter 9:12. A single sword-shaped stone could create many experts. As long as the Yin Palace could obtain this sword-shaped stone, they might become even more powerful than the royal family. How could they give up on the sword-shaped stone? Wen Kong and the middle-aged man from the royal family were both in the middle stage of the Supreme Being realm. The former was still manageable, but the middle-aged man was very difficult to deal with. Although Ma Cheng was at the peak of the Supreme Being realm, which was 1 level higher than Wen Kong and the middle-aged man, he had just broken through. If it was only Wen Kong and the middle-aged man, he would not have any problems. However, with Luoluo's participation, Ma Cheng felt a lot of pressure. No, it was not pressure. Under the joint attack of the 3, he could not fight back at all. Damn it! Ma Cheng cursed in his heart. If he continued to hold on to the sword-shaped stone, he might be killed by the 3 of them. After he made a decision in his heart, he took out a sword-shaped stone and threw it at Wen Kong. This sword-shaped stone was the sword-shaped stone. Its appearance immediately attracted everyone's attention. That's the sword-shaped stone? Yi Xian's eyes lit up. He only took a glance at it before he heard a system notification. Ding! Sword-shaped stone discovered. Will you carve it? Yes. Yi Xian answered without hesitation. Of course, his goal was to get this sword-shaped stone. How could he refuse? Ding! Sword-shaped stone started. Current progress. 1%. Ding! Sword-shaped stone started. Current progress. 2%. Ding! Sword-shaped stone started. Current progress. 3%. The speed of carving was very slow. Yi Xian was very anxious. At this moment, the sword-shaped stone fell into Wen Kang's hand. Ding! Carving stopped. The sword-shaped stone was taken by Wen Kong, so the carving of the stone was stopped. Hand over the sword-shaped stone. When the middle-aged man saw this, he immediately turned around and attacked Wen Kong. Bang! Wen Kong was too slow to take the sword-shaped stone. He was severely injured by the middle-aged man and was sent flying. Only now did he realize that he had fallen into Ma Cheng's trap. When he saw the sword-shaped stone just now, his brain spasmed and he took it. Only now did he realize that he had fallen into Ma Cheng's trap. There was nothing he could do about it. After all, his goal was the sword-shaped stone. Seeing the stone flying towards him, how could he not catch it? Humph, you dare to plot against senior brother Wen? Go to hell. Luo Luo wasn't distracted by the appearance of the sword-shaped stone. She shouted angrily and continued to attack Ma Cheng. Yi Xian had been assisting Luo Luo from the very beginning, but he didn't dare to get close to Ma Cheng because the 8th bolt of tribulation lightning was coming. Boom! Finally, the 8th bolt of tribulation lightning struck down. Yi Xian took the sovereign tribulation lightning head-on. In the next moment, a system notification sounded in his mind. Ding! You have successfully transcended the tribulation. You are now an A-tribulation supreme being at the early stage. You are currently rebuilding your golden body of supremacy. He had finally broken through. Yi Xian couldn't help but smile. However, he had just passed the 8th level of tribulation, so he was still in the process of rebuilding his sovereign golden body. The sovereign golden body was in the process of rebuilding, so his defense was the weakest. Any attack from the people present would be able to cut off his head. Young master, I'll hold this guy back. You go and take the sword-shaped stone. Luo Luo's voice sounded in Yi Xian's mind. All right. Although he didn't know how Luo Luo became so strong and jumped 4 levels to challenge Ma Cheng, it wasn't the time to care about that. Yi Xian immediately rushed towards the middle-aged man. Wen Kong was weaker than the middle-aged man. With a crisp sound, his wrist was cut off by the middle-aged man and he was sent flying. Wen Kang's interspatial ring fell into the hands of the middle-aged man from the royal sacred dynasty. Retreat! After the middle-aged man got the interspatial ring, he quickly turned around and left. You want to leave? Stay. Yi Xian, who had just recovered some of his eye power, immediately used the Nirvanic eye on the middle-aged man's back. Nirvanic cut. Shoo! The silver slash tore through the air. When the middle-aged man heard the sound behind him, he quickly turned around. However, it was too late. Rip! The middle-aged man was instantly killed by the silver slash. His entire body was cut in half by the Nirvanic cut. Yi Xian quickly rushed over and kept the interspatial ring of the middle-aged man and Wen Kong. Ding! Beginning to carve the sword-shaped stone. Current progress. 4%. Ding! Beginning to carve the sword-shaped stone. Current progress. 5%. Ding! Beginning to carve the sword-shaped stone. Current progress. 6%. The carving of the sword-shaped stone was extremely slow. It was 10 times slower than when Yi Xian was carving the demonic god statue. However, it didn't matter. After all, he had successfully passed the heavenly tribulation. Among the people present, who could fight with him? Ding! Reconstruction of the sovereign golden body completed. The system notified again. In the next moment, Yi Xian was cut in half. When Ma Cheng saw this scene, his body trembled violently. One Yi Xian was already so strong. Now there was another one? Let's go. Immediately, Ma Cheng quickly turned around. You want to leave? It's not that easy. Yi Xian quickly rushed over. He was even faster than Ma Cheng. In the blink of an eye, he overtook Ma Cheng. Yi Xian's original body, doppelganger, and Luo Luo joined forces. Ma Cheng couldn't withstand them at all. Young master, do you want to use charm? Luo Luo reminded him. No, just kill him. Yi Xian shook his head. Ma Cheng was an elite disciple of the Yin Palace. His spiritual resistance was probably very high. Moreover, he didn't have much eye power now. Therefore, he didn't use charm. Eye of Nirvana. Yi Xian's eyes flashed. Ma Cheng, who was restrained by Luo Luo, saw a silver slash coming at him. He was scared out of his wits. This guy even killed his own people? This was a question in Ma Cheng's mind. This Nirvana Ren might kill Luo Luo too. However, how could Yi Xian attack Luo Luo? Swish! At this moment, Ma Cheng's body trembled. He realized that Luo Luo had disappeared. Within a certain range, Yixian could hide Luo Luo in the artifact space. Therefore, at the critical moment, Yixian hid Luo Luo. Swish! Ma Cheng's body was cut in half diagonally. However, he didn't die immediately. However, he was quickly beheaded by Yixian, who rushed over with the invisible sword. Ma Cheng, who was ranked 5th among the inner disciples of the Yin Palace, died just like that. This matter finally came to an end. Chapter 9:13. However, just as Yixian thought that this was the end of the matter, a powerful aura suddenly rushed in his direction. Immediately, his expression changed. Not good. A powerful enemy is attacking. It might be the 9th tribulation supremacy of the Yin Palace. Yixian shouted in a low voice. Wen Kong and the other two, who were still surprised by Yixian's strength, were frightened when they heard this. A 9th tribulation supremacy. That was the top fighting force of the royal sacred dynasty. A 9th tribulation supremacy was enough to kill all of them. That aura quickly approached, but Yixian didn't stay idle. He quickly rushed to Wen Kang's side and directly opened a void gate. Quick, go in. Yixian said somewhat anxiously. Wen Kong, who had lost an arm, didn't dare to delay and directly passed through the void gate. The man in black and the woman in white also went in. The Eye of the Void required a large amount of eye power to open a void gate. At the same time, maintaining the void gate also required a continuous consumption of eye power. After Yixian and the others entered the void gate, a person rushed out from a dark corner. Stay here. A loud shout rang out, but Yixian had already passed through the void gate. The person who rushed out from the corner was a beautiful middle-aged woman. Her aura was very powerful. She was definitely the 9th tribulation supremacy of the Yin Palace. Unfortunately, she was one step too late. The void gate opened by Yixian was teleported to the entrance of the secret realm. When they came out of the void gate, Wen Kong and the others were shocked. What kind of method is this? Wen Kong was shocked. Senior brother one, don't worry so much. Let's leave the secret realm first and return to the Burning Sun Hall. Yixian said. The 9th tribulation supremacy saw them enter the void gate and estimated that she would arrive soon, so they had to leave quickly. Okay. Wen Kong didn't care about his arm now. Although the sovereign golden body of an 8th tribulation supremacy was more difficult to repair, as long as he handed the sword-shaped stone to the Burning Sun Hall, he wouldn't be afraid of a lack of treasures. At that time, not only would his arm grow back, he would also obtain a large amount of treasures. However, when Yixian led Wen Kong and the other two out of the secret territory, they found that the deep-sea cavern outside the secret territory was heavily surrounded. More than 10 powerful auras pressed down on everyone. More than 10 8th tribulation supremacies. Yixian was shocked. Among these dozen or so 8th tribulation supremes, there were two whose auras were not weaker than Ma Cheng's. However, what truly frightened him was that there was actually a 9th tribulation supreme martial artist outside the secret realm. Someone who came out of the secret realm? This 9th tribulation supreme was an old woman. When she saw Yixian, she frowned and asked, "Who are you?" However, before Yixian could speak, someone shouted, "Palace Master, the one with the severed arm is Wen Kong. They are from the Burning Sun Hall." Not good. Yixian's expression darkened. He quickly used the Eyes of the Void to break through the void. Wen Kong and the other two thought that they were going to die. When they saw the void door, they hurriedly rushed in. What a strange technique. Stay here. The 9th tribulation supreme martial artist immediately attacked. Immediately, a wave of energy enveloped Yixian. However, at that moment, half of Yixian's body had already stepped into the void door. Damn it! Yixian cursed angrily. He directly summoned his clone and slapped the back of his original body. At the same time, his doppelganger also quickly entered the void door. Whoosh! The void door closed. Everyone was shocked. Breaking open the void, and another person who looked exactly like him appeared. What kind of technique was this? Damn it! The sword-shaped stone must be in his hands. The palace master of Juyin Palace cursed angrily. Yixian had saved him in the nick of time. If he had been a moment later, the void door would have closed. At that time, if he had fallen into the hands of Juyin Palace, he would have been done for. He would have been raped and killed by the people of Juyin Palace. Previously, Yi Xian could directly break open the void in the Hall of Burning Sun and summon his doppelganger. In other words, the Hall of Burning Sun had always had a location in the void. Therefore, Yi Xian's void door led directly to the Hall of Burning Sunday Puff. At that moment, Yi Xian, who had just come out of the void door, could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. This blood was not because of the slap from his doppelganger. It was because he had overused his sky eyes. Damn it! When I overused my sky eyes and did not have enough eye power, it consumed my vitality, Yi Xian said helplessly in his heart. Overusing his sky eyes consumed his vitality. That was why his eyes had disappeared. Vitality was lifespan. After knowing this fact, he did not dare to use his sky eyes carelessly anymore. Young master, are you okay? Luo Luo, who had also been released from the void by Yi Xian, hurriedly asked. I'm fine. I just got slapped by myself. In order not to worry Luo Luo, Yi Xian lied. Then he said to Wen Kong, Senior Brother Wen, please inform the others. He had already inscribed 80% of the sword-shaped stone. When the experts from the Hall of Burning Sun arrived, he estimated that he would have finished inscribing it. He was already starting to wonder what kind of reward he would get. Okay, I'll go now. Wen Kong did not care about his broken arm, and left with his junior brothers and sisters. The higher-ups in the Hall of Burning Sun would definitely not expect to get a sword-shaped stone. There were also 9th Tribulation Supremes in the Hall of Burning Sunday. Almost all of them had comprehended 90% of the sword intent. However, the sword-shaped stone had a different value to them. Not long after Wen Kong left, Yi Xian heard a notification sound. Ding! Sword-shaped stone inscription successful. Now this sword-shaped stone was no longer of any use to Yi Xian. Even if he lost it, he would not feel bad. Luo Luo, what happened to you just now? At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly asked. Although Luo Luo was not injured, her face was pale. At this moment, her hair had already returned to its original white color. After hearing this, Luo Luo immediately took out the tuft of golden hair that was hidden in her tail. She said with a crying face, Woo-woo, in that state just now, I needed to continuously use this tuft of golden hair. In that short period of time I used up 5 of them. Yi Xian was speechless. He reminded her, I see. Then you should use it sparingly in the future. This tuft of golden hair is related to your bloodline. Don't use it up when the time comes. Okay. Luo Luo pouted and nodded obediently. This was the first time she used the golden hair to increase her strength. At that time, she was only in the middle stage of the 7th Tribulation Supremes. She was actually able to fight evenly with Ma Chang, who was at the peak of the 8th Tribulation Supremes. After all, her strength would increase as her cultivation level increased. If she used it again when she was at the 8th Tribulation Supremes, she would not be afraid of even a 9th Tribulation Supremes. Chapter 9:14. Soon, several powerful auras entered Yi Xian's sensing range. It seemed that the higher-ups of the Burning Sun Hall had arrived. This group of experts all rushed into Yi Xian's residence. There were more than 10 people who rushed in, and most of them were elders. One of them was even Yi Xian's master, Han Ming. However, this group of people stood respectfully behind an elder. Needless to say, this elder was the Burning Sun Hall master. When he saw Yi Xian, he said nervously, You obtained the sword-shaped stone? Greetings, sect master. Yi Xian pretended to be heavily injured as he said this. Then he took out the sword-shaped stone from the devouring space. The moment the stone appeared, a commotion broke out. Sword-shaped stone. It really is the sword-shaped stone. The Incineration Sun Hall master raised his eyebrows and took the sword-shaped stone. Although he had comprehended 95% of the sword essence, the sword-shaped stone was more attractive to him than anyone else. He held the stone and said to Yi Xian, You have done a great job this time. Tell me what you need. Yi Xian was waiting for this sentence. Before this group of experts arrived, Yi Xian had already written down what he wanted. What was left was the necessities for the Heaven's Eye, the forging materials for the Shadowless Sword and the Fallen Star Whip, and of course the heavenly treasures. The Burning Sun Hall master took the piece of paper and glanced at it. Then he raised his eyebrows. Yi Xian was asking for too much. I have only heard of the Eternal Flower and the Golden Sunstone. The Burning Sun Hall doesn't have them. However, we do have the materials for the Heaven's Eye. The Burning Sun Hall Master muttered. Other than the first few items, the rest are not a problem. The first few items were the necessities for opening the Heaven's Eye. Even the Burning Sun Hall didn't have them. Okay. Yi Xian nodded immediately. Although he was a little disappointed, he was still easily satisfied. The rest of the items were enough for him to make a breakthrough and forge the Shadowless Sword and the Fallen Star Whip. Palace Master at that time, junior brother Yi killed Ma Cheng from the Absolute Yin Palace. At the same time, there was also a group of experts from the royal dynasty. At this moment, Wen Kong suddenly spoke. An expert from the royal family? When the Inferno Sun Hall Master heard this, he couldn't help but frown. In the royal sacred dynasty, the one they didn't want to provoke the most was the royal clan. When the secret realm was discovered, there were even powerful warriors from the royal family nearby. What bad luck! However, the sword-shaped stone is already in our hands, and it is impossible for us to hand it over. The leader of the Burning Sun Palace snorted coldly. That's right, this is our chance. As long as we have the sword-shaped stone, we can destroy the Yin Palace. Even if it's the royal family, we don't fear them. The elders began to speak angrily. Yi Xian, you're injured now, so you'll need treatment first. I'll get someone to send the items over later. When the leader of the Burning Sun Palace finished speaking, he left with the group of people. Yi Xian, I didn't expect that you would be able to kill Ma Cheng, who was at the peak of the 8th Supremacy Realm. It seems like I don't have the qualifications to be your master anymore. Han Ming walked over and said to Yi Xian, Master is too serious. A teacher for a day is a teacher for life. Even if I transcend the Supremacy Realm, you will still be my master. Yi Xian said respectfully. He was very grateful to Han Ming. After all, if it wasn't for the 10 Supremacy Golden Cores, he and Luo Luo's strength wouldn't have increased so much. If that was the case, what happened after that day would have been different. If Yi Xian went out to do some random missions, he would have died 9 times out of 10, not to mention killing Ma Cheng and obtaining the sword-shaped stone. Han Ming nodded his head in satisfaction and said with a smile, Not bad, not bad. A genius like you can't be limited to the Supremacy Realm. In the future, you will definitely be able to break through the 3 misfortunes of the Supremacy Realm. Since you helped the Burning Sun Hall obtain the sword-shaped stone, the Hall Master will naturally allow you to comprehend it. With your aptitude, you might be able to comprehend Sword Force. After hearing this, Yi Xian was astonished. This was the first time he heard of this term. He immediately asked, Master, what is Sword Force? Sword intent is something that we Supremacy Realm experts learn. Above sword intent is Sword Force. Han Ming explained. Sword Force has a total of 3 realms. They are Minute Sword Force, Perfect Sword Force, and One with the Sword. Minute Sword Force, Perfect Sword Force, and One with the Sword? Yi Xian raised his eyebrows and said, Do these 3 realms correspond to the 3 misfortunes of the Supremacy Realm? Human body disaster, true energy disaster, and spirit disaster. That's right. Han Ming nodded his head and said, As long as you comprehend Sword Force, you will be invincible in the Supremacy Realm. Unless your opponent also comprehends Sword Force, no one will be able to block your attacks. Not only that, even a 9th stage human body disaster expert might not be able to comprehend the Minute Sword Force. It depends on your aptitude. From Han Ming's words, Yi Xian knew that there were only 3 realms. The Minute Sword Force, Perfect Sword Force, and One with the Sword. Not only could the sword-shaped stone rapidly increase one's sword intent, it could also allow one to comprehend Sword Force. It was a good item. Thank you for your guidance, Master. Yi Xian hurriedly expressed his gratitude. Haha, I have confidence in you. In the future, you will definitely be able to break through the 3 misfortunes of the Supremacy Realm. If you can comprehend Sword Force and reach One with the Sword, even a spirit disaster expert would not be able to block your attacks. Han Ming said with a smile. Yi Xian revealed a helpless expression. One with the Sword was the final realm of Sword Force. It corresponded to the spirit disaster realm. How could it be that easy to comprehend? However, Han Ming was right about one thing. He could definitely break through the 3 misfortunes of the Supremacy Realm. Soon after, Han Ming left. As for Yi Xian, he stayed in the residence with Luo Luo, waiting for the items from the Burning Sun Hall Master. Not long after, an elder brought the items over. Haha! Xian couldn't help but laugh. Although he didn't have the necessary materials to open his heaven's eye, he had obtained the materials for the Shadowless Sword and Fallen Star Whip, as well as a large amount of heavenly treasures. After the elder left, Xian poured some items into the devouring space, then threw the universe ring to Luo Luo. Luo Luo, take it yourself. After Xian finished speaking, he began to forge the Supremacy Realm spiritual treasure. The Shadowless Sword's embryo was already forged, so it didn't require much materials. The Fallen Star Whip's materials were also sufficient. In addition, there were forging blueprints for the 2 Supremacy Realm spiritual treasures, so Xian only spent a second to forge the Supremacy Realm spiritual treasure. Ding! The Shadowless Sword has been successfully forged. Ding! The Fallen Star Whip has been successfully forged. 2 system notifications sounded. Chapter 9:15. Xian swung the Shadowless Sword lightly, and the blade disappeared. It was as if Xian was using the hilt to slash someone. Unfortunately, the Shadowless Sword was just for show. For someone of his level, the Shadowless Sword was useless. Then Xian took out the Fallen Star Whip. The Fallen Star Whip was also a level 1 supreme spiritual treasure. Xian struck the ground with it. Bang! The ground suddenly exploded. This was the effect of the Fallen Star Whip. As long as it hit the enemy, there would be an explosion effect increasing its power. Luo Luo, the Fallen Star Whip is ready, but you don't know how to use it? Xian handed the Fallen Star Whip over and asked. Hehe, it's in my inherited memory. Also, it can help me quickly comprehend sword force. Luo Luo suddenly smiled mischievously. Quickly comprehend sword force? Xian raised his eyebrows. This girl actually had such a good thing in her inherited memory. No wonder she chose to forge the Fallen Star Whip instead of the Shadowless Sword. In addition, sword force was actually a general term. After all, sword force was the most common weapon. In addition to sword force, there were also knife force, and so on. However, people were used to calling it sword force. This girl's bloodline is too mysterious. I can't believe she even has this. I can't fall behind. Xian narrowed his eyes and said, Luo Luo, did you take all the things you wanted? Yes, these things are all very high level. I can refine them very quickly. Maybe my realm will be higher than yours? Luo Luo smiled and handed the interspatial ring back. Ahem. Xian took the interspatial ring awkwardly and found that at least 4/5 of the things inside were gone. Ding! The host has broken through. You are now at the mid-stage of the 8th Tribulation Supreme Master. The system notified. Those things were only enough for Xian to break through once. If he gave everything to him, he could at least reach the peak of the 8th Tribulation Supreme Master. However, he didn't say much. After all, Luo Luo was only in the middle stage of the 7th Supreme Martial Artist. She was 2 realms lower than him. When Luo Luo's realm increased, her strength would also be very strong. For the rest of the time, Luo Luo was refining the heavenly treasures that even the elders were envious of. Xian was also sitting there quietly. He had already recorded the sword-shaped stone in the Devouring system. As long as he wanted to, he could study it at any time. I only have 70.5 sword intent. The people from the Absolute Palace will definitely come knocking on my door. I have to increase my strength so that I can participate in the battle when the time comes. Xian squinted his eyes and began to study the sword-shaped stone. It would take at least 3 days for the Absolute Palace's team to arrive from the 10,000 Swords Villa's secret realm entrance. And in these 3 days, Xian's strength could still improve by quite a bit. Xian was meditating on the sword-shaped stone in his residence. In less than an hour, he heard a notification sound. Ding! 75% sword intent has transformed. It is now 85% sword intent. After half a day, ding! 85% sword intent has transformed. It is now 85% sword intent. After a day, in Xian's residence, the sovereign tribulation lightning started to gather above him. This was Luolua's breakthrough. In a day, Luoluo relied on her extraordinary refining speed to break through from the 7th Supremacy Realm to the 7th Supremacy Realm peak. At the same time, she also reached the limit and successfully received the 8th Supremacy Tribulation. Rumble. 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 8 consecutive sovereign tribulation lightning struck down. Luoluo, who was in the courtyard, stood there quietly and took the 8 sovereign tribulation lightning head-on. Among the cultivation resources given by the Hall Master of the Burning Sun Hall, there were hundreds of sovereign golden pills. Previously, Luo Luo had spent a lot of time refining, the utmost being golden pellets. However, as her cultivation level increased, her refining speed also increased. In addition to her bloodline and charm fusion crystal, Luo Luo refined 100 utmost being golden pellets in a single day. The 8th Supremacy Tribulation was no threat to Luo Luo. Rumble. After the last Sovereign Tribulation lightning struck, Luo Luo broke through to the 8th Supremacy Realm. Now Luolua's combat power was probably comparable to a 9th Supremacy Realm. If she consumed golden hair and transformed into a golden fox, even the Hall Master of the Burning Sun Hall would have to take her seriously. There are 2 more days. Continue to cultivate. After Luo Luo successfully passed the tribulation, Yixian continued to comprehend the sword-shaped stone. When the Yinju Palace came knocking on his door, he would show off his skills. If the patriarch of the Yin Palace was still alive, he might come. At that time, the patriarch of the Burning Sun Hall would definitely appear. As long as the siblings were related to the Yin-Yang patriarch, Yixian would naturally ask about it. Of course, even if he didn't ask, he still had the round jade pendant left by old immortal Tianju. As long as he broke through to the 3 sovereign disasters, he would know about the Yin-Yang patriarch. The remaining 2 days passed in a flash. In these 2 days, Luo Luo refined a large amount of things. Although there was still a lot of medicinal effects left in her body, and there were still many heavenly treasures left, she directly broke through to the 8th Supremacy Realm, the same level as Yixian. Luo Luo and Yixian signed a master and servant blood contract, which caused Yixian's beast god bloodline to mutate twice. Therefore, his growth speed increased by 30%. Yixian expected such a fast cultivation speed. In these 2 days, although Yixian's realm didn't increase, he continuously comprehended the sword-shaped stone, and had already raised his sword intent to 90%. In the Supremacy Realm, the highest level was the 9th Tribulation Supremacy Realm, and the sword intent was only 95%. When the sword intent transformed to 100%, it would condense into power and sword force. In 3 days, Yixian's sword intent had increased from 75% to 90%. With the shadowless sword in hand, his attack power was extremely strong. Even in the entire Burning Yang Hall, there were probably less than 3 people who could withstand a single strike from him. Because the Burning Sun Hall was peaceful, Yixian and Luo Luo continued to cultivate. They didn't know if the Yin Palace was scared or something, but they still hadn't arrived after 3 days. Could it be that they were afraid that the Burning Sun Hall's ancestor was still alive, and would rush out and catch them all in one fell swoop? However, just as Yixian was thinking about this problem, a roar suddenly came from the sky. Bastards of the Burning Sun Hall, get the hell out here. This was a woman's voice, and it sounded very old. Not only that, Yixian had heard this voice before. It was the palace master of the Yin Palace. They're here. After hearing this roar, Yixian and Luo Luo opened their eyes at the same time. Hehe, they're finally here. If they didn't come, I would have been bored to death. Luo Luo stretched her back and walked out. Yixian was also helpless. This girl really wanted to see the world in chaos. But speaking of which, he had comprehended the sword-shaped stone for 3 days, and his strength had increased by at least 10 times compared to when he was in the Myriad Sword Manor's secret realm. Chapter 9:16. When Yixian walked outside, he discovered that the Hall Master of the Burning Sun Hall and the others were hurriedly cutting through the air and flying towards the entrance of the Burning Sun Hall. Yixian and Luo Luo quickly followed them. The disciples of the Burning Sun Hall who were alarmed by the sudden shout also hurriedly followed after him. Who was it that had the guts to come to the Burning Sun Hall and make a ruckus? The Burning Sun Hall was one of the top powers in the royal sacred dynasty. There weren't many who dared to challenge them. Moreover, the voice belonged to an old woman. Thus, the disciples of the Burning Sun Hall guessed that the people who came were from the Juyin Palace. When the Hall Master of the Burning Sun Hall obtained the sword-shaped stone, he had already started making arrangements and notified the elders outside to return. This time there was going to be a huge battle. When Yixian arrived at the entrance of the Burning Sun Hall, he saw that there was already a group of people outside the protective array. There were more women than men in this group. They were the group from the Juyin Palace that Yi Xian had encountered in the secret territory of the Myriad Swords Manor. The palace master of the Juyin Palace was also among them. Everyone, my Burning Sun Hall and your Juyin Palace have been fighting for hundreds of years. This is the first time you have gathered so many people to come here. May I know the reason? The Burning Sun Hall master pretended not to know anything and asked. Cut the crap. You already know the answer and you still want to pretend that you don't know anything? The palace master of the Juyin Palace walked out with his walking stick. Humph, I haven't even said that your Juyin Palace planted a spy in my Burning Sun Hall? And you're already making false accusations? The Burning Sun Hall master snorted coldly. At this time a female disciple of the Juyin Palace suddenly walked forward and pointed at Yi Xian. Palace master, it was him that day. Everyone's gaze followed her finger and landed on Yi Xian. Me? What about me? Yi Xian walked out. Brat, let's not beat around the bush. That sword-shaped stone was snatched by you, right? The palace master of the Juyin Palace looked at Yi Xian. Senior, why do you think so? Yi Xian asked in return. As soon as he finished his words, someone jumped out and said, If it wasn't you, who else could it be? Yi Xian sneered and said, What a joke. When I left the secret territory that day, I was surrounded by a group of you palace masters. Your palace master even wanted to capture me. Your palace master wanted to capture me. That's right. If it wasn't for junior brother Ye's secret skill, I'm afraid that we would have already been killed. My Burning Sun Hall has fought with your Inju Palace for so many years. When have you ever shown mercy? Although the sword-shaped stone fell into Yi Xian's hands in the end, Wen Kong and the other two had contributed quite a bit, so they obtained quite a few benefits. 3 days ago, Wen Kong had consumed a heavenly treasure and grown a new arm. This sentence made the people of the Juyin Palace speechless. If they put themselves in Yi Xian's shoes, how could they not run when they encountered the palace master of the Juyin Palace? We didn't come here today for this matter. There were a few experts from the imperial family in the sword tomb. They witnessed the whole thing. The palace master of the Juyin Palace snorted and said, That brat killed Ma Cheng, who was ranked 5th in the inner sect of the Juyin Palace. He also killed a great elder of the imperial family. This is the truth. Then, senior, how can you prove that what he said is true? Yi Xian asked again. At that time, the team of the Juyin Palace had been killed by Yi Xian. At the same time, Yi Xian did find other people. But after Yi Xian killed Ma Cheng, the 9th Tribulation Supreme Master of the Juyin Palace came. So, Yi Xian didn't have time to kill other people. What those people said was only a verbal statement of facts. There was no concrete evidence. Humph, I don't care so much. I only know that the sword-shaped stone is in your palace of the Juyin Palace. Today you better hand it over. Otherwise, your palace of the Juyin Palace will be destroyed soon. The palace master of the Juyin Palace saw that they had no choice but to shed all pretense of cordiality. Haha, what a joke. You dare to say that you will destroy my palace of the Juyin Palace? The palace master of the Juyin Palace laughed when he saw the other party's expression. You better choose to believe that we don't plan to keep the sword-shaped stone for ourselves. We will give it to the imperial family. The palace master of the Juyin Palace replied. What a joke. If you get the sword-shaped stone, will you give it to the imperial family? The palace master of the Juyin Palace sneered. The palace master of the Juyin Palace continued. Do you know how the Myriad Sword Villa was destroyed hundreds of years ago? An innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth. After the sword-shaped stone of the Myriad Sword Villa was exposed, it was secretly destroyed by the imperial family. What? After the palace master of the Juyin Palace finished speaking, the people of the palace of the Juyin Palace were shocked. Not only that, the people of the palace of the Juyin Palace were also shocked. It was their first time hearing this secret. The Myriad Sword Villa was a powerful force hundreds of years ago. It was not any weaker than the palace of the Juyin Palace and the palace of the Juyin Palace. However, it chose to disappear in the end because it was secretly destroyed by the imperial family. Even the palace master of the Juyin Palace did not know about this secret. Really? The palace master of the Juyin Palace swallowed his saliva. Although the palace of the Juyin Palace was powerful, the imperial family could secretly destroy the Myriad Sword Villa, that was comparable to the palace of the Juyin Palace hundreds of years ago. Why else do you think the Myriad Sword Villa was destroyed? That secret realm was the place where the Myriad Sword Villa was forging. However, when the imperial family's experts arrived, they did not know that the sword-shaped stone was exposed. Therefore, other than the villa master of the Myriad Sword Villa, no one survived. The palace master of the Juin Palace explained. After hearing this, the people of the palace of the Juin Palace felt that it made sense. Yixian himself had entered the Myriad Sword Villa's secret realm. However, he did not meet anyone from the Myriad Sword Villa in the secret realm. After all, it was just a place for forging. When the Myriad Sword Villa was destroyed, only the villa master left. He probably returned to the secret realm when he was being hunted down and destroyed the entrance to prevent the imperial family from finding it. Because it was a secret place for forging, all the people inside were men. However, the villa master of the Myriad Sword Villa destroyed the entrance himself. If he did not destroy it, the imperial family would definitely find the entrance. It was also because of this that all the people who stayed in the secret realm died in the end. According to Wen Kong, there were many tombs in the palace. One of them was the villa master of the Myriad Sword Villa. After thinking about it, Yixian also felt that it was very scary. The villa master of the Myriad Sword Villa destroyed the entrance to the secret realm to avoid being hunted down. What was even more helpless was that the people who stayed in the secret realm were all men. If there were some women, the Myriad Sword Villa would not have been completely wiped out. They could have lived in the secret realm and not been destroyed. Chapter 9:17. However, there was one thing that Yixian did not understand. The secret realm was actually a corner of the world. The entrance to the secret realm was equivalent to a portal. That was why Yixian's Eye of the Void could not return to the Burning Sun Palace directly from the secret realm. He had to leave the secret realm first. Yixian guessed that the secret realm was an island, or there was a formation around it that prevented people from leaving. But then again, the Burning Sun Hall Master hesitated after hearing those words. "Old man, I advise you to hand it over to us," the palace master of the Yin Palace said. These words sounded like he was thinking for the sake of Burning Sun Hall, but no one present was an idiot. The sword-shaped stone was extremely precious. Even if the Burning Sun Palace master could not keep it, they would still be rewarded if they handed it over. How could the Yin Palace master take the sword-shaped stone away? "You guys have a good plan. You want me to hand over the sword-shaped stone to you, then you will hand it over to the imperial family?" The Burning Sun Palace master sneered. Without a doubt, this sentence was an admission. At this point they had no choice but to admit it. "So, the sword-shaped stone is in the Burning Sun Palace master?" The palace master of the Yin Palace narrowed his eyes. "That's right," the Burning Sun Palace master shouted. In the next moment, a stone that looked like a long sword appeared in his hand. It was the sword-shaped stone. When the palace master of the Yin Palace and the others saw it, their eyes lit up. "This is the sword-shaped stone?" The palace master of the Yin Palace raised his eyebrows. Even the imperial family of the royal sacred dynasty did not have a sword-shaped stone. Otherwise, why would the 10,000 Swords Manor be destroyed? Yixian knew how precious the sword-shaped stone was. He only spent 3 days to raise his 75% sword intent to 90% sword intent. A single sword-shaped stone was enough to create a top force that could even fight against the imperial family. A few hundred years ago, the imperial family of the royal sacred dynasty was afraid that the 10,000 Swords Manor would become stronger, so they destroyed it. "It is impossible for me to hand over the sword-shaped stone." The sword-shaped stone was obtained by the disciples of the Burning Sun Palace. "It is impossible for the Yin Palace master to take it away." The Burning Sun Palace master put the sword-shaped stone away. "Humph! The Myriad Sword Villa's secret realm was found in the territory of my absolute Yin Palace. How about this? The Juin Palace will also take a step back. We will hand over the sword-shaped stone to the imperial family, and we will split the reward equally," the palace master of the Juin Palace suggested. "So what if the 10,000 Swords Manor's forging mystic realm is in your absolute Yin Palace's territory? Your Juin Palace is still in the royal sacred dynasty. Doesn't that mean that everything in your Juin Palace belongs to the royal clan?" An elder of the Burning Sun Hall coldly snorted. The palace master of the absolute Yin Palace glanced at her and said, "So you don't agree?" "Not bad," the Burning Sun Hall master replied. He could have given it to the royal family by himself, so why did he have to share the benefits with another person? As long as one was not a fool, one would not do such a thing. Most importantly, he was in the territory of the Burning Sun Palace. Now that the Inju Palace had come knocking on his door, it was an excellent opportunity. So long as he killed all these people from the End Palace, then the End Palace would be finished. However, right at that moment, suddenly, a powerful aura caused everyone to tremble. This powerful aura came from the team of the Inju Palace. The team of the Inju Palace started to split into two. Then a figure slowly walked out. It was a red-clothed lady who looked to be in her 30s. Ancestor. When the palace master of the Inju Palace saw this person, he respectfully greeted her. Boom! This form of address frightened the people from the Burning Sun Hall. Was this red-clothed lady the founder of the Inju Palace? So powerful, I'm afraid she is a ninth supreme being. Yixian shuddered. The Burning Sun Hall master was only a ninth supreme being, and this lady was even more powerful than him. Greetings, senior. The Burning Sun Hall master did not expect this red-clothed lady to be here, so he hurriedly greeted her respectfully. The red-clothed lady ignored him and said softly, Senior brother, are you not coming out to see me? Although her voice was soft, it reverberated in the air and spread throughout the entire Burning Sun Hall. However, the way she addressed him frightened the others. Senior brother, that's senior brother? Aren't they siblings? Yixian raised his eyebrows. He understood that the red-clothed lady was greeting the founder of the Burning Sun Hall. Not long after, another voice echoed in the air. Junior sister, let's go back. It was obvious that the founder of the Burning Sun Hall was not dead. Senior brother, don't you know the importance of the sword-shaped stone? The red-clothed lady shouted again. This time, the founder of the Burning Sun Hall finally came out. He was a white-clothed youth with dashing eyebrows. So powerful, I can't sense any aura from him. He's just like an ordinary person. Yixian swallowed his saliva. With the eye of perception, he could not sense the other party's realm. This person was definitely much more powerful than the red-clothed lady, and might be about to pass the human body disaster. Senior brother, you finally came out. The red-clothed lady smiled and said, Don't worry, I have no other purpose today. What do you want to say? The youth with dashing eyebrows asked. The sword-shaped stone is very useful to us, but you have to know that it's not something we can get our hands on. The 10,000 Swords Manor is a good example. If we don't hand it over to the imperial family, I'm afraid that our two factions will end up like the 10,000 Swords Manor. The red-clothed lady said. Unexpectedly, the youth with dashing eyebrows immediately said, I won't give up on this sword-shaped stone. Senior brother, you're still as stubborn as before. Since the imperial family hasn't arrived yet, we still have a way to share this sword-shaped stone. The red-clothed lady said. Share the sword-shaped stone. After hearing this, Yixian's body trembled. Was the two factions joining forces? Even if our two factions join forces, we won't be able to go against the imperial family. You're saying that you want to open up a secret realm, and let my Burning Sun Hall and your Ending Palace enter together to comprehend this sword-shaped stone? The youth with dashing eyebrows squinted his eyes. That's right, we can follow the example of the 10,000 Swords Manor. As long as we destroy the entrance to the secret realm, even the imperial family won't be able to find it. The red-clothed lady nodded. The reason why the 10,000 Swords Manor didn't have a single person in the secret realm was because those who stayed there hundreds of years ago were all men, and there wasn't a single woman. However, the Burning Sun Hall mainly consisted of men, while the Ending Palace had many women. As long as they joined forces and brought some supreme saint beasts into the secret realm, they could live a good life. Chapter 9:18. Then why are you not willing to give up on this stone? If the Imperial army arrives, the Burning Sun Hall will definitely be destroyed. The lady in red reminded him. I will not give up. The man with sword-like eyebrows replied. Both parties were in a stalemate. After hearing this, everyone present felt a sense of pressure. It was a good way to enter the secret realm. Although there were men and women, old and young, and even supreme sacred beasts, who could stay in a sealed place for hundreds of years. However, the founder of the Burning Sun Hall was unwilling to give up on this stone. If the Imperial army arrived, the Burning Sun Hall would definitely be destroyed. Master. The Burning Sun Hall master frowned and looked at the young man with sword-like eyebrows. Don't worry. I have already opened up a new secret realm. This secret realm has 2 entrances. If the Imperial army arrives, we will enter and destroy this entrance. The young man with sword-like eyebrows was not worried at all. What? When the others heard this, they were shocked. No wonder the founder of the Burning Sun Hall was so calm. It turned out that he had already prepared a way out. Junior sister, please go back. The young man with sword-like eyebrows said to the lady in red. However, at this moment, roar! Suddenly, a deafening sound entered everyone's ears. When they listened carefully, it sounded like the roar of a giant beast. It's the Imperial Dragon. The young man with sword-like eyebrows and the lady in red's faces changed. They had heard this sound once before. Quick! Let everyone enter the secret realm entrance under my secret cultivation room. The young man with sword-like eyebrows hurriedly ordered. The news should have only reached the Imperial family after 3 days. The young man with sword-like eyebrows did not expect them to arrive so quickly. When the young man with sword-like eyebrows finished speaking, a huge figure descended from the sky. It was a brown giant dragon that was at least a few thousand meters long. It was extremely huge, and there were various strange patterns on its body. Immediately after, people jumped down from the dragon's back one by one. The Imperial army had finally arrived. Burning Sun Hall, how dare you hide a sword-shaped stone? I will give you 10 breaths to hand it over to me. Otherwise, I will exterminate your entire sect. A rough-looking man rushed over, followed by 2 people wearing the Imperial family's uniform. 3/9 Supreme Being Peak Supreme Beings. The young man's expression changed. He was in trouble now. At this moment, the Burning Sun Hall master had already started to evacuate the disciples. However, how could 10 breaths of time be enough? Although there were only 1,000 soldiers from the Imperial family, all of them were elites of the 7th Supreme Martial Artist realm and above. This wasn't the main point. The main point was that there were still 3/9 Tribulation Supremacies from the royal family, and more than 29th Tribulation Supremacies. This wasn't something that the Burning Sun Hall could deal with. Hee, it seems like you don't want to hand it over. All soldiers, listen up, break the formation. The boorish man shouted when he saw the Burning Sun Hall evacuating its disciples. In an instant, countless attacks were launched at the grand array of the Burning Sun Hall. Rumble! A series of deafening explosions rang out. Women of the Inju Palace, back off for me. Otherwise, I'll kill all of you as well. The boorish man shouted at the Inju Palace as he attacked. At this moment, Absolute Palace was in a dilemma. The lady in red obviously wanted to help the young man, but the young man's intentions had been seen through. The Imperial family army had already started to attack. Once the formation was broken, the Burning Sun Hall would be in danger. Ancestral Master, what should we do? The palace master of the Inju Palace asked with a frown. Let's retreat first. The lady in red said softly. In fact, she still wanted to help the Burning Sun Hall. Although the enmity between the Inju Palace and the Burning Sun Hall had been accumulating for hundreds of years, it was actually caused by some disciples 100 years ago. At first, the Inju Palace accidentally killed a disciple of the Burning Sun Hall, so the conflict arose. However, the lady in red hadn't appeared to resolve it in the past 100 years. Only by continuing to fight could she ensure that her senior brother wouldn't forget about her. Immediately, the Inju Palace's team retreated a long distance. This time, the Inju Palace had also brought many experts. Other than the lady in red, the palace master of the Inju Palace, and the Great Elder, there were also 4 9th Tribulation Supremacies. If they joined forces with the Burning Sun Hall, they wouldn't be afraid of the Imperial army. However, behind the Imperial army was the entire Imperial family. Once they made a move, they would be challenging the authority of the Imperial family. At that time, the entire Inju Palace would be dragged into the water and fall into a state of eternal damnation. Rumble! The entire Imperial army was attacking the protective mountain array. Fortunately, there were experts in the Burning Sun Hall controlling the array. Otherwise, after a few rounds of attacks, the protective mountain array would have been broken. 1 breath. 2 breaths. 3 breaths. The Imperial army was attacking, while the Burning Sun Hall was defending. Yi Xian, who was in the Burning Sun Hall, was already burning with fighting spirit. However, he hoped that the Burning Sun Hall could successfully retreat. As long as all of them entered the secret realm and destroyed the entrance, they would be safe. Although he didn't know where the other entrance to the secret realm was, judging from the expression of the young man with the sword eyebrows, the other entrance wouldn't be easily found by the imperial family. Perhaps it was in another sacred dynasty. However, looking at the current situation, there didn't seem to be enough time. I didn't expect the imperial army to arrive so quickly. What a blunder. The young man with the sword eyebrows' eyes flickered. He guessed that the imperial army must have rushed through the secret realm, which was why they arrived so quickly. If he knew that this would happen, he would have already given the order to retreat. Lin Zhantian, I'll give you one more chance. Hand over the sword-shaped stone and I'll guarantee the safety of the Burning Sun Hall. The rough man shouted. Lin Zhantian was the name of the Burning Sun Hall's founder. Scram! Unexpectedly, Lin Zhantian roared. He estimated the strength of the protective mountain array and said, Elders, prepare for battle. The elders of the Burning Sun Hall had already taken out their weapons. There were more than 40 elders in the Burning Sun Hall. They were all at least 8th Tribulation Supremes. Founder, we can also fight. One of the disciples shouted. The inner disciples of the Burning Sun Hall were almost all 7th Tribulation Supremes. There were also quite a few 8th Tribulation Supremes. They could fight against the experts of the Imperial family. We are willing to live and die with the Burning Sun Hall. Yes, live and die together. A group of disciples and deacons shouted one after another. Many of them grew up in the Burning Sun Hall. The Burning Sun Hall was their home. Now that their home was about to be destroyed, they naturally had to stand up and stop it. All right, the young man with the sword eyebrows shouted. At the same time, he glanced at the Burning Sun Hall master beside him. Master, the sword-shaped stone has been taken away by junior brother. The Burning Sun Hall master said. His junior brother was the Vice Hall Master of the Burning Sun Hall. Chapter 919. The Inferno Sun Hall Master nodded. He was already prepared to fight to the death. However, he was still very nervous. After all, the royal army actually sent out 3 9th stage supreme martial artists. On their side, there was only one 9th stage supreme martial artist and him, a 9th stage supreme martial artist. If they fought, they would not have the upper hand. However, if the Inju Palace could help, the outcome would be different. The people of the Inju Palace were good at illusions and mental attacks. They could also control flying swords. Their team battle ability was very strong. If they could get their help, they would definitely win this battle. Boom! 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 The strength of the protective array weakened bit by bit. In the Inferno Sun Hall, Yi Xian had already secretly taken out the supreme spiritual treasure, Shadowless Sword. He could not provoke the 3 9th stage supreme martial artists, but he could find trouble with the others. With my current realm bloodline and Shadowless Sword, killing a 9th stage supreme martial artist is not a problem. Lolua's strength is not bad either. If other people are added, it's not impossible. Yi Xian thought in his heart. However, the 3 9th stage supreme martial artists were troublesome. He hoped that Lin Zhantian, as the founder of the sect, could hold them back. Luo, don't be too far away from me later. Try to charm as much as you can. If you encounter danger, call me immediately. Yi Xian reminded in his mind. Okay. Luo nodded. Luo had merged with the charm fusion crystal previously, and her charm ability had greatly increased. With her 8th stage supreme martial artist realm, as long as it was not a 9th tribulation supreme martial artist, she would have no problem. At this moment, rumble. A loud sound was heard, and the protective array was finally broken. Kill! Lin Zhantian shouted as he led the charge towards the Imperial army. Lin Zhantian, you are seeking your own death. The rough man shouted and led the experts under his command. However, he still formed a team and bypassed Lin Zhantian, directly entering the Inferno Sun Hall to find the entrance to the secret realm. Don't let them in. The Inferno Sun Hall master shouted and led a few people to kill, preparing to intercept this team that wanted to sneak into the secret realm. A great battle began. This was not the first time that Yi Xian had participated in such a large-scale battle. Previously, in the Sunflame Sacred Dynasty's Sky Prison, He had weaved through tens of thousands of soldiers. However, he didn't dare to wander around here. After all, he hadn't gone to the flowing gold waterfall to strengthen his sovereign golden body yet. Flowing shadow sword. Yixian summoned his doppelganger. He summoned 6 flying swords and attacked the extreme king army. At the same time, he kept swinging his shadowless swords to attack the 8 tribulation elites. The two sides had already clashed head-on. Brat, your aptitude is not bad. Go to hell. A peak-level supreme martial artist from the royal family headed straight for Yixian. Humph! Yixian snorted coldly and glared at him, casting a burning eye. Luoluo, who was following behind Yixian, took this opportunity to use her charm. Lolo's eyes turned pink. Not only that, but that 8th supreme martial artist was also the same. The charm was a success. After the charm was successful, this 8th supreme martial artist took off his interspatial ring and threw it at Yixian. Then, he turned around and attacked his own people. Bam! A mid-level supreme martial artist's head was cut off before he could react. What are you doing? His actions immediately attracted the attention of others. However, some sharp-eyed people immediately noticed that something was amiss. There's someone from the Foxy clan. Be careful of her charm. Someone warned. Unfortunately, before he could finish his sentence, he heard a whistling wind. Boom! An explosion suddenly sounded in the air. This talkative consecrator's head was directly smashed by Lolo's fallen star whip. Humph! Who asked you to be a busybody? Luoluo snorted unhappily. Those from the Een Palace cultivated spiritual techniques and had high spiritual resistance. However, the imperial family, like those from the Burning Sun Palace, still cultivated their sovereign golden body. Therefore, Yixian and Lolo's cooperation was flawless. One weakened spiritual power while the other charmed. They were simply invincible. However, the charm could only easily charm those below the 9th Tribulation Supreme Martial Artist level. It was not a problem for 8th Tribulation Supreme Martial Artists. Therefore, Yixian and Luoluo gave up. Luoluo, let's go find the 9th Tribulation Supreme Martial Artist. Yixian said to Luoluo in her mind. Okay. Hearing this, Luoluo giggled and followed. With the eye of perception, Yixian could clearly sense that there were more than 29 Tribulation Supreme Martial Artists in the imperial family. As long as he killed these people, the pressure on the Burning Sun Palace would be reduced. At this time, the 9th Tribulation Supreme Martial Artist targeted by Yixian was fighting with an early-stage 9th Tribulation Supreme Martial Artist elder from the Burning Sun Palace. Yixian killed more than 10 people along the way. When he got close, he directly slashed with his sword. Flowing Shadow Sword. With the shadowless sword in hand, his attack power was definitely not something an ordinary 9th Tribulation Supreme Martial Artist could block. Moreover, it was a sneak attack. Rip! This beam of sword light directly split the opponent's body into 2 halves. What? The elder from the Burning Sun Palace was shocked. An opponent who was on par with him was actually killed in a second? He turned to look and found that the killer was only a mid-stage 8th Tribulation Supreme Martial Artist, Yixian. Before he could react, Luoluo hooked the fallen star whip and directly threw the interspatial ring to Yixian. Very good next. Yixian was very satisfied. Even if it was not all of a 9th Tribulation Supreme Martial Artist's wealth, it was comparable to that of 10 peak 8th Tribulation Supreme Martial Artists. Before the elder could react, Yixian went to find the next target. Yixian's original body and Luoluo worked together, while his doppelganger was killing the 8th Tribulation Supreme Martial Artists. His original body's cultivation was still increasing. He was destined to shine in this battle. However, he was still unable to control this battle. Yixian once again killed a 9th Tribulation Supreme Martial Artist, then turned to scan with the Eye of Revelation. Lin Zhantian was already fighting with the burly man. The former was fighting 1 against 3, but Lin Zhantian's opponents were the imperial family's high officials. 1 against 2 was already his limit. In a 1 against 3 situation, he did not have the strength to fight back. Fortunately, his golden body was strong, otherwise he would have been defeated. Ancestral Master can't hold on for long. I must weaken the opponent's strength as soon as possible. Yixian thought in his heart. However, at this moment, whoosh, 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 a series of air-piercing sounds were heard. Flying swords swept into the crowd and attacked the imperial family's experts. What? The imperial family's experts turned to look and saw the people from the Een Palace flying towards them. Old women, you dare? The burly man shouted. Chapter 920. The Absolute Een Palace finally made a move. Although the Absolute Een Palace and the Burning Sun Hall had a grudge against each other, the lady in red would not ignore Lin Zhantian. You old woman, today I will uproot both of your sex. The rough man turned around and attacked the lady in red. With one less opponent, Lin Zhantian's pressure was reduced by half. Now he was not afraid of the other party. With the addition of the Absolute Een Palace, the situation was reversed. The pressure on the experts of the Burning Sun Hall was reduced by a lot. However, there were casualties at the start of the battle, and the experts of the Burning Sun Hall fell one after another. Don't let others take it. Yi Xian reminded in his mind. To him these were all experience points. Moreover, they were fighting in the air, so his 7 agility advancements were not effective. Otherwise his killing speed would at least double. Yes. Luoluo nodded. She waved the fallen star whip in her hand. Every time it hit someone it would destroy their sovereign golden body. If the whip hit the head, unless it was a 9th tribulation supremacy, they would definitely die. However, there were not many people who used the whip. Moreover, Luoluo was from the Fox Charm clan, so naturally there were people who wanted to attack her. That is a supreme spiritual treasure? A mid-stage 9th tribulation supremacy noticed Luoluo and immediately rushed over. Supreme spiritual treasure. There was actually a supreme spiritual treasure. This was a huge gain. One had to know that in the entire royal sacred dynasty, there was only one supreme spiritual treasure. Luoluo, you are being targeted. Yi Xian felt the aura approaching Luoluo. Come, young master, let's kill him. Luoluo did not care at all. All right. Yi Xian smiled devilishly. His original body and clone approached at the same time. 3 attacks from 3 directions. Eye of Nirvana. Eye of Nirvana. Demon Fox Flash. 3 flashes of light rushed towards the mid-stage 9th tribulation supremacy. What? He was startled. This speed scared him. Just as he was about to escape, his escape route was blocked. Hiss! Hiss! 2 crisp sounds rang out. He dodged one Nirvana Rend, but the other Nirvana Rend and Demon Fox Flash passed him. His entire body was instantly cut into 3 pieces. At the same time, his universe ring was hooked by Luoluo's fallen star whip and fell into Yi Xian's hand. This person probably didn't expect to die here. He must have brought quite a lot of things with him. Luoluo If Yi Xian killed the remaining 5, he would definitely be able to make another breakthrough. Luoluo Xian immediately called for Luoluo, and together with his doppelganger, they rushed towards the nearest 9th tribulation supreme martial artist. Whether it was Yi Xian himself, his doppelganger, or Luoluo, all of them had the ability to easily kill an early-stage 9th supreme martial artist. If the 3 of them joined forces, even a mid-stage 9th supreme martial artist would have to temporarily avoid them. They killed their way over and killed many people along the way. The Eye of Nirvana consumed too much of his life force. After the previous lesson, Yi Xian didn't dare to casually use his life force to replenish his eye power. Yi Xian and Luoluo teamed up and targeted another mid-stage supreme martial artist from the imperial family. At this moment, this expert from the royal family was fighting with the first elder of the Burning Sun Hall. The latter was being beaten back repeatedly. Fortunately, there was still a 9th tribulation supreme venerable from the Een Palace helping. Otherwise, the Burning Sun Hall Grand Elder would have died long ago. Flowing Shadow Sword. Flowing Shadow Sword. Yi Xian immediately joined the battle and launched an attack at the mid-stage supreme martial artist. 2 streaks of cold light pierced through the air, giving the other party a fright. What a powerful attack. This mid-stage supreme martial artist from the imperial family was shocked, because the attack launched by Yi Xian's original body was even more powerful than his. Yi Xian's original body wielding the shadowless sword and infusing it with 90% sword intent was enough to break through the opponent's golden sovereign body, and even kill him instantly. Slash. The mid-stage supreme martial artist from the imperial family slashed with his sword with all his might and defeated the attack of Yi Xian's original body. However, the moment he made his move, swish, bam! Suddenly, a long silver whip hit his arm. After an explosion, his arm was blown into two pieces. Luo Luo, who was wielding the Fallen Star whip, wasn't any weaker than Yixian's clone. However, there was still a gap between her and Yixian's original body. Nevertheless, it was enough to threaten the opponent. The imperial family consecrator was shocked when his sword-wielding arm was blown off. His golden sovereign body was extremely powerful, but it was actually blown apart by a mid-stage supreme martial artist little girl. How was this possible? 95% whip intent or a sovereign spiritual treasure? He instantly reacted. In the next moment, he took out another high-grade sovereign divine weapon and charged towards Luo Luo. Luo Luo chuckled. Her laughter was very innocent. In the next moment, she turned into a ray of light again. The imperial family consecrator was shocked once again. Just as he was about to make a move, the ray of light swept past him and his head was instantly thrown into the air. Demonic fox flash. Upon seeing this scene, Yixian couldn't help but say in his heart, Luo Luo seems to have used this demonic fox flash for a long time. It shouldn't be a sovereign martial art. It should at least be a transcendent martial art on the same level as a sovereign spiritual treasure. Or perhaps it should be a divine ability. The current him was no longer the inexperienced brat who had just stepped out into the world. The realm above the sovereign stage was called the three minor disasters of the sovereign stage. They were the human body disaster, true energy disaster, and spirit disaster. These three were just minor disasters. After the spirit disaster, there was a great disaster. This great disaster was a shackle similar to the sovereign tribulation. After the great disaster, the realm was called the manifestation realm. As for the divine ability, it was the name of the manifestation realm, just like the sovereign martial arts of the sovereign stage. After witnessing Luo Luo's strength, Yixian guessed that the bloodline in Luo Luo's body was very powerful. It might even surpass the three minor disasters of the sovereign stage. It was at least at the manifestation realm. In fact, Yixian could give Luo Luo a bloodline seed, such as the sword god bloodline. However, Luo Luo had a mysterious bloodline that could mutate the beast god bloodline. Therefore, Yixian couldn't be sure. What if Luo Luo consumed the sword god bloodline and concealed the mysterious bloodline? Or perhaps, the sword god bloodline would be concealed by the mysterious bloodline and wouldn't have any effect. If that was the case, Yixian would have wasted a bloodline seed. Most importantly, Luo Luo didn't want it. Therefore, Yixian couldn't force her. After the death of the 9th stage sovereign consecrator, Yixian obtained his universe ring and his cultivation improved. Chapter 921. At this moment, 2 of the 5 mid-stage supreme beings had already fallen. Not only that, Yixian and his doppelganger had also recovered quite a bit of their eye power. Immediately, they went to find their third target. Along the way, those who blocked their way were all killed by them. Eye of Nirvana, Demon Fox Flash, Flowing Shadow Sword. Yixian and Luo Luo once again joined forces to launch a sneak attack. Their target was actually discovered, but they didn't expect the attack to be so powerful, so they were killed in a moment of carelessness. The third mid-stage supreme being had fallen. Luo Luo, you will assist me next. Yixian said to Luo Luo. Young master, I can still use Demon Fox Flash twice. Luo Luo suddenly replied. What? Yixian was stunned for a moment and said helplessly, You little girl, why didn't you tell me that you improved after breaking through? I forgot. Luo Luo cutely stuck out her tongue. She had already used Demon Fox Flash 3 times, but she could still use it twice, just enough to deal with the remaining 2 mid-stage supreme beings. At this moment, they continued to search for their target. At the same time, Yixian handed the invisible sword to his doppelganger. Because it was his doppelganger who used Eye of Nirvana, now it was his turn to use it. The Gemini bloodline was really useful, but it was a pity that the realm of the Gemini bloodline couldn't be shared, so it had to be combined once. If his doppelganger could also increase his doppelganger's level, how good would that be? Eye of Nirvana, Flowing Shadow Sword, Demon Fox Flash. Under the 3 attacks, another mid-stage supreme being from the royal family fell. At this moment, Yixian was very close to the peak of the 8th supreme being. As long as he killed the last mid-stage supreme being, this battle would be over. However, Yi Xian's killing of 4 mid-stage supreme being from the royal family fell into the eyes of one person. Not good, we are gradually falling into a disadvantageous position. Yang Chun, go and kill the twins and that fox. The rough man shouted while dealing with the red-clothed woman. The Yang Chun he was talking about was actually one of Lin Zhantian's opponents. It's not that easy to leave. Lin Zhantian quickly blocked in front of the other party. In a 1 versus 2 situation he could still handle it. Just now, he had also been paying attention to Yi Xian's side. He didn't expect Yi Xian to be able to kill 4 mid-stage supreme beings in a row. His strength was really explosive. The situation was reversed in an instant. The last mid-stage supreme martial artist was fighting with the palace master of Juyin Palace. However, Yi Xian and Luoluo had already approached them. Now Yi Xian and his doppelganger were unable to use the Eye of Nirvana, but Luoluo still had one more demon fox flash. The 3 of them, together with the palace master of the Juyin Palace, killed the last middle stage 9th supreme martial artist in an instant. 2 supreme spiritual treasures? The palace master of the Absolute Yin Palace was also shocked. In the entire royal sacred dynasty, there was only 1 supreme spiritual treasure. But now 2 had appeared at the same time. What was going on? While she was still in shock, Yi Xian had already obtained the last interspatial ring. Ding, the host has broken through. Currently, the host is at the peak of the 8th supreme martial artist. When the system notification sounded, Yi Xian immediately merged with his doppelganger. The palace master of the Absolute Yin Palace felt that his eyes were blurry again. Last time Yi Xian had split into 2 in front of him and successfully escaped. This time the 2 actually merged into 1. What was going on? After the merger and the next realm was upgraded, Yi Xian separated again. Since he had broken through, it was more or less time for him to take charge of this battle. Immediately, his original body and doppelganger rushed towards Lin Zhantian. As for Luoluo, she continued to stay here. At this moment there was no one who could threaten Luoluo, so Yi Xian was more at ease. After breaking through, Yi Xian's battle strength had increased tremendously. It was no problem for him to deal with a peak 9th supreme martial artist. As long as he helped Lin Zhantian hold one back, then Lin Zhantian would have no problem dealing with one. Of course, with Yi Xian holding the supreme spiritual treasure, he might be able to kill one of them. In an instant Yi Xian rushed in front of Yang Chun. Flowing Shadow Sword. Flowing Shadow Sword. Yi Xian's original body and doppelganger attacked at the same time. A peak 9th supreme martial artist was already the top battle strength of the royal sacred dynasty. Although Yi Xian was only a peak 8th supreme martial artist, with the shadowless sword and bloodline in his hand, he could definitely contend with a peak 9th supreme martial artist. He actually has a supreme spiritual treasure, he is mine. Yang Chun suddenly revealed a greedy expression. If he had a supreme spiritual treasure, Lin Zhantian would definitely be beaten up like a dog. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was not so easy to deal with. Boom! 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 With the shadowless sword, Yi Xian's original body's attack power was not something Yang Chun could block, so he could only dodge. Due to the addition of the red-robed woman, Lin Zhantian's pressure was reduced by half. Now that Yi Xian had come to hold another person back, Lin Zhantian's arrogance immediately rose. Die! Lin Zhantian's entire body seemed to be burning as he directly sent his opponent flying with a punch. The 95% fist intent directly injured his opponent. At that moment he took advantage of the opportunity to pursue an attack. As long as he could kill a peak 9th supreme martial artist, this battle would be settled. The rough man also swallowed his saliva. He felt that the situation was not good, and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. Originally, 3 peak 9th supreme martial artists, 5 mid 9th supreme martial artists, and more than 10 early 9th supreme martial artists were enough to sweep away any power in the royal sacred dynasty. Unexpectedly, the Yin Palace dared to interfere. Not only that, but 2 super geniuses with supreme spiritual treasures appeared and killed all 5 mid 9th supreme martial artists of the royal sacred dynasty. If this continued, the 3 of them would most likely die here. Go! The rough man was hesitant. However, at this moment, bold thief. Suddenly, an earth-shattering roar fell into everyone's ears. This voice was 10 times louder than the rough man's voice just now. With just 4 words, the group of people below were directly stunned. In an instant, hundreds of figures appeared in the air. Wang! Yixian also felt a piercing pain in his eardrums. His entire body was in a daze. Although his battle strength was strong, his realm was still too low. Who exactly was it that made more than half of the people lose their battle strength with just a roar? Yixian immediately shook his head and opened his eye of revelation. When he looked up, he saw an old man descending from the sky like a celestial. At this moment, the old man just happened to throw out a palm. This palm was incomparably huge, even bigger than the dragon just now. Its power was definitely not to be underestimated. Not good, Luo Luo. Yixian raised his eyebrows and hurriedly recalled Luo Luo back. In the next moment, this huge palm came crashing down. Rumble. Chapter 922. Rumble. As the giant palm fell, the ground cracked. The people in the air felt as though the entire world was trembling. Fortunately, Luo Luo had already been hidden in Yixian's storage space, so she was safe. Huff huff, that scared me to death. Yixian heaved a sigh of relief. Young master, run. He has already surpassed the Supreme Being realm. Luo Luo's voice rang in Yixian's mind. Surpassed the Supreme Being realm. When Yixian heard this, he looked at the old man who had killed over 100 people with a single strike. He was completely dumbfounded. Surpassed the Supreme Being realm? Didn't that mean that he had passed the human body disaster? A Supreme Being cultivated the Supreme Being golden body. However, the Supreme Being golden body only meant that his defense was strong. Once a Supreme Being passed the human body disaster, even if it was only the first stage of the human body disaster, his physique would be greatly improved. In comparison, even 10 Lin Zhantians wouldn't be a match for that old man. That old man was comparable to over 1 million mighty soldiers, enough to sweep through the entire royal sacred dynasty. More importantly, that old man was vicious and merciless. That palm strike of his had even killed many of his own people. Insightful eye. Yixian hurriedly swept his gaze over and found that those who survived were relatively far away. As long as they were hit by that palm strike, not a single one of them survived. He glanced around and found a familiar figure in the group of dead people. Master! Yixian's eyes widened. Han Ming hadn't been able to dodge that palm strike and had his bones shattered. He was already dead. Not only that, even the palace master of the Absolute Yin Palace had died under that palm strike. That was a mid-stage Supreme Being. Bastard! Yixian couldn't help but curse. Unexpectedly, that sentence attracted the old man's attention. That old man had clearly just arrived. Otherwise, he would have already attacked Yixian. After all, Yixian had a Supreme Being spiritual treasure in his hands. Retired Emperor, that brat has a Supreme Being spiritual treasure. The burly man suddenly roared. What? The old man was shocked. Supreme Being spiritual treasure? There was only one Supreme Being spiritual treasure in the entire royal sacred dynasty. Now another one had appeared. Brat, hand over the supreme spiritual treasure to me, and I'll spare your life. The old man spoke to Yixian in a condescending manner. After all, he was the retired emperor of the royal sacred dynasty, a cultivator who had transcended the supremacy plane. In his eyes, supremes were nothing more than ants. However, Yixian still had a chance to escape. Brat, I don't like to wait. Since you won't hand it over, I'll take it myself. When this voice sounded out, regardless of whether it was Yixian's original body or his clone, they both quickly broke through the void. Although he really wanted to save Lin Zhantian and the others, the old man in front of him was not someone he could fight against. He could only escape. Otherwise, he would have to sacrifice himself. Just as Yixian's true body stepped into the void door, the old man rushed down. You want to leave? Die. The old man used his palm as a saber and slashed out viciously. Xiu! The saber chi also passed through the void door and slashed towards Yixian. Fortunately, half of the saber chi was blocked by the void door, but even so, Yixian's abdomen was directly penetrated. At this moment, somewhere in the royal sacred dynasty, Yixian, who had passed through the void door, spat out a mouthful of blood. If the void door had closed slowly, his heart would have been cut in half. Young master, are you all right? Luo Luo hurriedly asked. Just now, Yixian did not have much eye power, but in order to escape the old man's pursuit, he had no choice but to overdraw on his life force. At this moment both his original body and clone were blind. This was the aftereffect of overdrawing on his life force. "I'm fine, I didn't hurt my heart." Yixian heaved a sigh of relief. The void positioning could locate a total of 3 places. One of them was the Burning Sun Hall, while the other 2 were based on the requirements. The place where he was now was just outside the 10,000 Swords Manor's secret territory. "Who's there?" Before Yixian could catch his breath, someone shouted. With the eye of perception, Yixian could sense a large group of people around him. They were all wearing armor, and it seemed that they were from the Imperial family. "The Imperial family killed my master. This hatred is absolutely irreconcilable." Yixian's original body's injuries began to heal. In the next moment he transformed into a god of death. In just a few breaths' time, this group of 100 people died at the hands of Yixian. Among them, there was even a 9th tribulation supremacy. "Young master, what should we do now?" Luoluo asked. Yixian let Luoluo out and thought carefully for a moment. Just now everything was hanging by a thread. If I had left a little later, I'm afraid I would have died there. If the Vice Palace Master of the Burning Sun Hall saw that something was wrong and destroyed the entrance to the secret territory, then they might have had a chance to live. I'm afraid that if the entrance was not destroyed and the sword-shaped stone fell into the hands of the Imperial family, no one in the Burning Sun Hall or the Yin Palace would have survived. Yixian sighed. The scene from before was still fresh in his mind. If he had not left, there would only have been a few more corpses. He was only a peak 8th supremacy. Even if he had broken through to 9th supremacy, he was still far from being a match for that old man. Really, it would have been better if we had just handed over the sword-shaped stone. Why did we have to cause the destruction of our sect? Luoluo also did not understand. If they had handed over the sword-shaped stone obediently, they might have been rewarded greatly. That way, the Burning Sun Hall would not have been destroyed. Not only that, but so many people would not have died. That old man's palm strike killed our master. We have to avenge him. Yixian looked at the corpses around him with flickering eyes. Han Ming had died under that old man's giant palm strike. Not only that, but there were also many elders and disciples of the Burning Sun Hall. Since he was a disciple of the Burning Sun Hall, he naturally had to avenge the Burning Sun Hall. Hearing this, Luoluo was also angry. She finally had a master, but he was killed by a single palm strike. Immediately she shouted angrily, "Young master, shall we directly kill our way into the Imperial Palace?" Imperial Palace? Yixian's eyebrows twitched. The Imperial Palace was the most heavily guarded place in the entire country. The imperial capital of the Royal Sacred Dynasty was so deep that it could drown people. However, with their current strength they had the ability to do so. In the entire Royal Sacred Dynasty, only the retired emperor had passed the 3 sovereign disasters. However, this was not a child's play. Yixian had to plan carefully. If the entrance to the secret realm that the disciples of the Burning Sun Hall escaped from was destroyed, the retired emperor might not return to the Imperial Palace. However, if the entrance to the secret realm was discovered and the sword-shaped stone was recovered, the retired emperor would probably take the stone back to the Imperial Palace. Of course, there were other possibilities. The Burning Sun Hall and the Absolute Yin Palace only had 2 peak 9th supremacies. They were Lin Zhantian and the red-robed lady. As long as the old man found the other entrance to the secret realm, he could send peak 9th supremacies to worship it. There was no need for him to do it personally. Chapter 923. In fact, Yixian felt very helpless. If the void lock was located in the imperial capital, then he could directly break through the void lock and travel to the imperial capital. At that time they would have the upper hand. But now they had to rush for time. "Young master, then let's go quickly. That old man actually killed master. I will definitely make him regret it," Luoluo said angrily. Yixian was the same. Why did he become so strong? Wasn't it to protect his family and friends? Although the eastern continent was guarded by old immortal Tianju, who knew how long he would guard it? If someone stronger than old immortal Tianju came to the eastern continent, then the eastern continent would be destroyed. Only with strength could one protect their family and friends. "Let's go," Yixian said in a low voice, then rushed in a certain direction. He had to race against time. As long as he arrived an hour earlier than the royal sacred dynasty's retired emperor, then the entire imperial palace would be under his control. In order to make things easier, he also sent his clone to other places, which was to plunder the various main cities' city lord mansions. In the royal sacred dynasty's main cities, the city lords were at least 9th tribulation supremes, and each of them had extraordinary wealth. Yi Xian was currently at the peak of the 8th tribulation supremes. If he cooperated with Luo Luo, it wouldn't be a problem for him to control a 9th tribulation supremacy. Moreover, the main body and clone shared the devouring space and the storage space, so Luo Luo could run between them. They immediately set off. The main body rushed to the imperial capital, while the clone started plundering the main cities. This secret realm was actually closer to the Juyin Palace, but in the previous battle, the Juyin Palace helped a lot. Otherwise, the Elder Assembly of the Burning Sun Hall would have collapsed in an instant. Yi Xian estimated that the imperial army was already advancing towards the Juyin Palace. In less than an hour, Yi Xian found a city. Although it wasn't the main cities, it was not bad. The peak of the 8th tribulation supremacy clone directly killed his way in, took control of the city lord, and took a large amount of good things. Then he rushed to the next location. The whole process only took 3 minutes. Time slowly passed. As time passed, the cultivation of Yi Xian's original body grew stronger and stronger. After all, everything he obtained was devoured by his original body, so his speed naturally increased. Although the imperial family consecrators who came to the Burning Sun Hall were very strong, they didn't bring many things with them. However, after Yi Xian's doppelganger and Luo Luo worked together to charm the other party immediately handed over all their wealth. Therefore, in less than half a day, Yi Xian's gains had already surpassed the gains from that battle. 1 day later. Ding! Host has met the requirements to transcend the tribulation. The current success rate is 95%. Do you wish to transcend the tribulation? When Yi Xian heard the notification, he did not answer immediately. Instead, he let his clone use the eyes of the void. Young master, can you transcend the tribulation? Luo Luo also passed through the void door and arrived beside Yi Xian's true body. Yes. Yi Xian nodded and merged with his clone. Ding! The current success rate of tribulation is 100%. Do you wish to undergo tribulation? Yes. After merging with his clone, his strength increased by 10%. The success rate of transcending the tribulation was directly over 100%. At this moment, the place where he was transcending the tribulation was only half a day's journey away from the imperial capital. Above Yi Xian's head, the 9th level tribulation began to condense. This was already the last level of the supremacy tribulation. As long as he transcended this level of tribulation, his strength would increase tremendously. At that time, no one below the 3 sovereign disasters would be a match for him. Rumble! The supremacy tribulation lightning struck down. Yi Xian just stood there quietly, accepting the baptism of the supremacy tribulation lightning. Rumble! The second supremacy tribulation lightning struck down. The first half of the 9th level tribulation lightning was child's play. However, the second half of the tribulation lightning was stronger than the previous one. Since the founding of the royal sacred dynasty, countless people had died under the 9th level tribulation lightning. At least 10,000 people had died. And those who succeeded in transcending the tribulation were estimated to be less than 1%. However, the 9th level tribulation lightning was child's play to Yi Xian. Rumble! 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 Another 3 supremacy tribulations struck down. At this moment, Yi Xian had already endured 5 supremacy tribulation lightning. However, at this moment he suddenly felt several powerful auras. Luo Luo, there are people. Yi Xian reminded her. To be able to attract young master's attention, their strength is definitely not simple. I will go and rob them. Luo Luo laughed lightly and prepared to follow Yi Xian's gaze. No need, let them come over themselves. Yi Xian just stood there quietly. Alright, but I think it's another group of people who want to take advantage of the situation. Luo Luo had a look as if she had already seen through it. In the wild, when meeting someone undergoing tribulation under normal circumstances, one would go and take a look. After all, undergoing tribulation was not a small matter. Many people would take advantage of the situation and attack the other party. If one was careless and the other party was struck to death by the tribulation lightning, then they would have profited. At this moment, within the range of Yixian's senses, several ninth tribulation supremacies were rushing towards him. One of them was even a mid-stage ninth tribulation supremacy. However, Yixian and Luo did not care at all. Not only Yixian, but even Luo's strength was not ordinary. A mid-stage ninth tribulation supremacy was just a matter of a few whips to Luo. Soon those people rushed over. How strange, undergoing tribulation on a plane. How audacious. A burly man looked at them with a mocking expression. Yixian looked at them coldly. There were a total of 5 people for early-stage ninth tribulation supremacies, and 1 mid-stage ninth tribulation supremacy. Their strength was not ordinary. They were probably from some large faction in the imperial capital, or they belonged to the imperial family. Big brother, there's also a little girl from the Fox clan. She's so pretty and looks like a virgin. She's also a mid-stage 8th tribulation supremacy. If we give her to the imperial family, we'll definitely get a good price. A small-eyed man came forward and smiled vulgarly at the burly man. Yixian was a peak 8th tribulation supremacy, and Luo was a mid-stage 8th tribulation supremacy. Although they were only a step away from the peak 8th tribulation supremacy, they would probably be able to break through to the peak 8th tribulation supremacy by the time they entered the imperial capital. However, this strength was really not worth mentioning for the 5 people in front of them. The burly man couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Little brother, didn't your clan elders tell you that you have to find a hidden place to undergo tribulation? Haha. Hearing this, Yixian grinned and said, I've never chosen a place to undergo tribulation. It doesn't matter even if it's a mountain of blades or a sea of flames. Chapter 924. However, the moment he said that, the other party laughed out loud. What shameless boasting. Kid, do you have any last words? The small-eyed man asked. No last words, as long as you have the ability to kill me. Yixian smiled and didn't want to waste any more words. He directly said to Luo, kill the other 4. Charm the mid-stage supreme being. Yes, young master. Luo immediately took out her fallen star whip and attacked instantly. Yixian originally wanted to continue talking nonsense, but he suddenly remembered that he was in a race against time. It was better to end this quickly. Whoosh whoosh. Luo's whip was very fast. It directly hit the small-eyed man's head. Bang! With a loud explosion, the small-eyed man's head exploded. The other 4 people were stunned. They saw that Luo was only a mid-stage supreme being, so they didn't move. However, they didn't expect her attack to be so powerful. One whip was enough to kill one of their companions. That's a supreme being's spiritual treasure. Kill! The leader of the brawny men immediately reacted. However, before they could attack, Yixian, who was in the middle of his tribulation, quickly slashed 3 times with his sword. Whoosh! 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 3 sounds broke through the air. The remaining 3 early-stage supreme beings were all killed. At the same time, Yixian also used the burning eye on the mid-stage supreme being brawny man. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Luo quickly used her charm. Although there was a difference of 3 realms, the charm fusion crystal greatly increased Luo's charm ability. Even if she couldn't succeed, she could still weaken the opponent by a large amount. Eye of control. Ding! Control successful. When the system notification sounded, the brawny man was subdued by Yixian and became Yixian's servant. Who are you? Yixian asked. I'm Xie Shan from the imperial capital's Xie family. The brawny man began to introduce himself. From their conversation just now, Yixian knew that he wasn't from the imperial family. However, when Yixian heard the brawny man's words, he was also surprised. This strong man's younger sister was actually the crown princess. The crown princess was the crown prince's official wife. If the crown prince was not deposed, she would be the empress in the future. As long as his sister became the empress, he would be the imperial uncle. Yixian didn't expect to meet someone of such status. He immediately asked, Do you know if the retired emperor of the royal sacred dynasty is in the imperial capital? I don't know. Xie Shan shook his head. It had only been a day and a half since the incident at the Burning Sun Hall. If the retired emperor had not obtained the sword-shaped stone, he would not have returned. However, if he had obtained it, he would most likely have returned to the imperial capital. Therefore, Yixian might need Xieshan to inquire about some matters. Immediately, Yixian collected all the items in their interspatial rings. Boom! At the same time, the ninth bolt of tribulation lightning struck down. Ding! The host has successfully transcended the tribulation. He is now an early-stage ninth tribulation supreme venerable. By the time the system notification rang out, Yixian's physique and true energy had undergone a tremendous change. Now, he was almost invincible among the supreme beings. Then he led Xieshan and continued on their journey. There was still half a day's journey to the imperial capital. However, Yixian's speed was much faster after his breakthrough. He estimated that he would only need 3 hours to reach the imperial capital. Although he had the sword-shaped stone in his body, with his current strength, 90% sword intent and 95% sword intent did not matter. His strength was between the Supreme Being and the 3 sovereign disasters. With the sovereign spiritual treasure, he could easily kill a mid-ninth Supreme Being with a single strike. Even a peak ninth Supreme Being would not be able to block it. The weaker ones would be killed instantly. However, if he were to face that palm strike, he was still too weak. Unless he broke through to the mid-ninth Supreme Being or peak Supreme Being, he might be able to defeat that palm strike with his shadowless sword and bloodline. Yixian continued his journey. His clone also broke through the void and left the imperial capital, continuing to plunder the main city. 3 hours later, they arrived at the imperial capital. Xieshan, go and see if the imperial capital has issued a warrant for us. Yixian ordered. Yes, master. Xieshan nodded and immediately rushed to the imperial capital's gate. He was the crown princess's brother, so he could be considered a relative of the imperial family. Naturally, the city guard recognized him. Soon he returned. How is it? Yixian asked. Master, you are not wanted. The retired emperor has not returned yet, Xieshan replied respectfully. Not wanted. That was good. However, the city guard might not know whether the retired emperor had returned or not. Perhaps the retired emperor had already returned, but he did not know. After all, the retired emperor was an expert who had surpassed the Supreme Being level. Since they were not wanted, they could easily enter the city. Moreover, with Xieshan around, even if they were wanted, it would be fine. Yixian followed Xieshan into the city. Since Luolua was from the Fox Charm clan, Yixian directly hid her in his storage space. Young master, what should we do now? Luoluo asked in Yixian's mind. Just go. Although they had already arrived at the imperial capital, Yixian did not choose to go to the imperial capital just to be safe. The auction house in the imperial capital was jointly established by the 4 great clans of the imperial capital. Yixian went to the auction house first because he wanted to see if there was anything he needed. However, just as Yixian was rushing to the auction house, Xieshan suddenly slapped his head and said, Master, I remember. One of the things you want has been auctioned before. What? Hearing this, Yixian was shocked. It's the heartbreak fruit. It was auctioned at the imperial capital's auction house a month ago, but I forgot who bought it, Xieshan said hurriedly. The heartbreak fruit was a must for Yixian to open a third eye. It's the heartbreak fruit? It's the thing to open the eye of decomposition. Yixian's eyes widened and said, Hurry, hurry. He had already opened a lot of third eyes, and every one of them was very useful. Every time he opened a third eye, his strength would increase. After hearing this news, Yixian hurriedly asked Xieshan to bring him to the imperial capital's auction house. Using his identity, Xieshan directly called the auction house manager over. There were a total of 4 auction house managers in the imperial capital. The one Xieshan called over was his second brother, Xiehai. Xiehai was the same as Xieshan, a mid-stage 9th Supreme Being. Third brother, didn't you go to Mount Changhen to deal with that 9th rank Supreme Being sacred beast? Why are you back so soon? After seeing Xieshan, Xiehai asked in surprise. Then his gaze fell on Yixian. This little brother is... Yixian did not waste any time and directly released Luoluo. Burning Eye. Charm. Eye of Control. Chapter 925. Who bought the heartbreak fruit a month ago? Yixian asked directly. Xiehai paused for a moment, as if trying to recall something. The heartbreak fruit was rare, but its price wasn't very high, so he didn't pay much attention to it. After a while he replied, I think it was the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince? Yixian and Luo looked at each other. Then at Xia Shan. Wasn't Xia Shan and Xia Hai's sister the Crown Prince's wife? Okay, I understand. Yixian nodded. The Crown Prince had bought the heartbreak fruit a month ago. If the Crown Prince used it, it would be a tragedy. You guys, go to the treasury and bring everything to me. Yixian ordered again. He didn't come to the auction house just for the items needed to open his heaven's eye, but also for the huge amount of wealth. This is an important treasury. It requires 4 people to open it together, Xia Hai replied. Then call the other 3 people one by one. Yixian continued. Yes. Xia Hai nodded and left. He didn't dare to disobey Yixian's orders. The 4 great clans of the imperial capital were the Xie, Chan, Lin and Yuan clans. Soon Xia Hai called the Cheng clan's manager over. Without a doubt, the manager was also under Yixian's control, followed by the Lin and Yuan clans. Now that the managers of the 4 great clans were under Yixian's control, Yixian could enter the auction house's treasury. This time Yixian wouldn't be merciful. He directly emptied the treasury, leaving nothing behind. This treasure trove was worth at least 10 main cities. Moreover, this wasn't referring to the 10 main cities, but the value of the entire main city. Young master, give me 1 more day and I will be able to pass my tribulation. Luo was in a good mood after obtaining a large amount of heavenly treasures. Although she was only at the mid-8th stage of the Supreme Being realm, she was about to reach the peak. With these heavenly treasures, she was confident that she could break through to the 9th tribulation Supreme Being realm in 1 day. As for the rest, they were all swallowed up by Yixian. The combined wealth of the 4 great clans is probably even more than this auction house. However, the 4 great clans all have 9th Great Martial Saint Realm experts. Although they can kill the other party in an instant under the circumstances of a sneak attack, once they are discovered, they will only alert the enemy. Yixian thought, if the Emperor Emeritus wasn't in the imperial capital, it wouldn't matter. After all, he was invincible among the supreme beings. After thinking for a while, Yixian decided to take a gamble. And his decision was to kill all the 9 supreme martial artists of the 4 great clans and gather all the wealth. It happened to be the middle of the night, so it was convenient for him to do things. Xia Shan, Xia Hai, take me to the Xie clan. Yes. Xia Hai and Xia Shan looked at each other. The Xie clan was one of the 4 great clans in the imperial capital. Although Xia Tian was only a mid-9th stage supreme being, their father Xia Xian was a peak 9th stage supreme being. Before going to find Xia Xian, Yixian wanted to control the Xie clan's patriarch Xia Tian. Soon, he followed Xia Hai and Xia Shan to the Xie clan and found Xia Tian. Second brother, there's an auction tomorrow. Why are you back? Third brother, didn't you go to Mount Changhen? When Xia Tian saw the 2 of them, he was also very surprised. However, before Xia Shan and the other 2 could speak, Yixian directly released Luo. Burning Eye. Charm. Eye of Control. Yixian took control of the Xie clan's patriarch, Xia Tian. Do you have the authority to access the Xie clan's treasury? Yixian asked. Yes. Xia Tian nodded. Yixian's eyes lit up. He thought that only the Xie clan's patriarch, Xia Xian, could access the Xie clan's treasury. Since Xia Tian had the authority, he would save the trouble and avoid alerting the enemy. Take me there. I want all the Xie clan's wealth. Yixian didn't hold back. Xia Tian didn't dare to disobey. He led Yixian and the others to the Xie clan's treasury. Every power had a place to store their wealth. They couldn't put everything on one person. These things had to be put in a safe place. Even Xia Hai and Xia Shan didn't know about the Xie clan's treasury. Only the patriarch of each generation knew about it. Yixian and Luo arrived at the Xie clan's treasury under Xia Tian's lead. After Xia Tian handed all the Xie clan's treasures to Yixian, Yixian was shocked. The treasures in the Xie clan's treasury were almost comparable to the entire auction's treasury. Very good. Yixian nodded satisfactorily. Next, he used the same method to control the patriarchs of the other 3 clans and obtain their treasures. His actions were stealthily done. After he plundered the 4 great clans, he finally heard a system notification. Ding! The host has broken through. The host is now a mid-stage 9th Tribulation Supreme Martial Artist. Luoluo, who was beside him, felt Yixian's aura suddenly skyrocketing. She smiled and said, "Congratulations on breaking through, young master. It's not enough. With my current strength, I still can't fight against the retired emperor." Yixian shook his head. He knew his limits. Even with his current strength, he couldn't block the attack just now. Although he wouldn't be killed instantly, he would at least be seriously injured. Therefore, he still couldn't fight against the retired emperor. However, if he broke through to the peak of the 9th Tribulation Supreme Martial Artist and activated the disintegration eye, he might be able to. Now that I've broken through to the mid-stage 9th Tribulation Supreme Martial Artist, no one can stop me even if I kill my way into the Imperial City. However, I can't guarantee that the old man hasn't returned yet. Yixian thought to himself. "Young master, what should we do with these people?" Luoluo asked. "These 4 great clans are all relatives of the emperor. They all have people in the imperial palace. Moreover, they have done many shady things in secret. Kill them all and leave one alive." Yixian's expression turned cold. He controlled the top echelons of the 4 great clans, so their secrets naturally couldn't escape his interrogation. The patriarchs of the 4 great clans had the blood of countless innocent people on their hands. Therefore, it didn't matter if they were killed. Yixian had no qualms about killing them. In less than half an hour, the 4 great clans' patriarchs and 4 shopkeepers were all killed by Yixian. Only Xieshan was left. "Now, bring me into the Imperial City and find the Crown Prince," Yixian said to Xieshan. "Yes, master." Although his own brothers had been killed by Yixian, he still didn't dare to betray Yixian. This was the strength of the Eye of Control. Apart from the limited number of eyes, the Eye of Control was stronger than Luoluo's charm in every aspect. Chapter 926. Bewitchment required the use of spiritual energy, but the Eye of Control didn't. Furthermore, the bewitched could be easily seen through by others, and in certain circumstances, the bewitched could break free from the bewitchment. If Xieshan's master was Luoluo, and he was bewitched by Luoluo, and Luoluo ordered Xieshan to personally kill his brothers, Xieshan would hesitate. This meant that Xieshan could break free from the bewitchment on his own and regain his freedom. With the Eye of Control, Xieshan wouldn't hesitate, and wouldn't betray Yixian. Of course, breaking free from the bewitchment on one's own usually happened when one's emotions fluctuated greatly. When one's emotions fluctuated greatly, one's spiritual energy would suddenly increase. However, as long as the master's spiritual energy was strong enough, the bewitched wouldn't be able to break free even if they killed their entire family. Xieshan brought Yixian alone to the Imperial City. It was already late at night, and the number of guards in the Imperial City at night was twice as many as in the day. "Who are you?" When Xieshan approached the gates of the Imperial City, he was stopped by a general. "It's me." Xieshan walked over and revealed his identity. "So it's Duke Xia." The general immediately recognized Xieshan. At this time, his gaze landed on Yixian and he said, He's my younger cousin. I'm here to look for my younger sister." Xieshan directly replied, "Oh, Duke Xia, please." The general didn't doubt him at all and directly shouted, "Let him in." Xieshan was considered a top figure in the Imperial City, and he frequently entered the Imperial City through his connections. He had a good relationship with the Crown Prince, so even if he brought a group of people in, nothing would happen. With him around, Yixian successfully infiltrated the Imperial City. After that, Xieshan brought Yixian to look for the Crown Prince. There were more than 10 princes in the Imperial Sacred Dynasty, but the one who became the Crown Prince in the end was the 13th prince, who was only 22 years old. This Crown Prince was younger than Yixian, but his realm was exactly the same as Yixian's. They were both mid-stage Supreme Being. However, when Yixian was an early-stage Supreme Being, he could easily control Xieshan and the others. Now that he had broken through to mid-stage Supreme Being, even a peak Supreme Being wouldn't be able to escape his clutches. At the same level, Yixian didn't need Luoluo. "Young master, I've broken through. I think I'll be able to undergo tribulation tomorrow." When Xieshan brought Yixian to the Crown Prince, Luoluo's bell-like voice rang in Yixian's mind. As an Yixian artifact, Luoluo could still cultivate in the artifact space. "All right." Yixian's eyes flickered. If Luolua was allowed to break through to the 9th Tribulation Supreme level, she would be an invincible existence among the Supreme level experts. However, if she wanted to contend against the retired emperor, she would probably have to use that tuft of golden hair. After a while, Xieshan led Yixian to the Crown Prince's sleeping quarters. "We want to see the Crown Prince," Xieshan said to a general outside the Crown Prince's chamber. "All right, please wait a moment, Duke Xia." The general nodded and immediately entered the Crown Prince's chambers. At the same time, Yixian used his Eye of Revelation to scan the area. The Crown Prince's chambers were very large, and there were many people living here. However, Yixian also had the Eye of Perception. Together with the Eye of Revelation, he quickly found the Crown Prince, who was in the middle stage of the Supreme Being Supreme level. At this moment, the Crown Prince was in the middle of a piston movement. It was unknown whether the person under him was Xieshan's sister or another concubine. Soon the general found the Crown Prince. However, the Crown Prince was in the middle of something. Naturally, the Crown Prince was furious when the general suddenly disturbed him. The general, who was refused entry, ran out with a gloomy face and said, "The Crown Prince said he won't see you. He has to see him even if he doesn't want to," Yixian said in his heart. His eyes flashed and the general's face suddenly turned ferocious. In the next moment, he looked at Yixian very respectfully. "This way, please." The general, who was in the middle stage of the Supreme Being Supreme level, suddenly stepped aside. The surrounding Imperial guards were shocked. Didn't the Crown Prince say he wouldn't see him? Why did the general change his mind? However, they didn't dare to ask. Yixian forcibly took control of the general and entered the Crown Prince's palace. Then, under the general's lead, they found the Crown Prince's residence again. "Damn it, didn't I say I won't see you?" The Crown Prince, who was in a small palace, was furious. He directly jumped down from his bed without even putting on his clothes. However, at this moment, boom! The palace's door was suddenly forced open. The Crown Prince was stunned. He was about to say, "How dare you barge in?" However, when he saw the person who had entered the palace first, he couldn't help but be stunned. "Who are you?" The Crown Prince immediately released his vital energy, because he felt that Yixian's cultivation level was not lower than his. Could he be an assassin? Just as he finished speaking, he happened to see the general and Xieshan close the door of the palace, one on the left and one on the right. "Who I am is not important." Yixian didn't want to waste time with him. His eyes flashed. The burning eye. The eye of control. In the next moment, the Crown Prince of the Royal Sacred Dynasty became Yixian's servant. "Greetings, Master." The Crown Prince, who was naked, knelt down on one knee. Behind him, the concubine lying on the bed had a very interesting expression. She didn't even have time to cover her body. She just watched. The Crown Prince of the Royal Sacred Dynasty actually knelt in front of a young man and called him master. She couldn't understand this. Could it be? After being dazed for a moment, the concubine's eyes lit up. She hurriedly got off the bed and ran naked to the Crown Prince's side. "Greetings, Lord Emissary." The concubine hurriedly shouted. Her face was flushed and her hair was a little messy. However, she didn't dare to touch it because she saw that Yixian's expression was very serious. Just now Yixian had rushed in with an aggressive aura. Someone who dared to do this in the palace definitely came from that place. Yixian glanced at the concubine and was slightly surprised. This concubine's skin was white and her figure was hot. Such a great beauty was kneeling in front of him naked. This was the first time this had happened. As long as it was a man, he wouldn't be able to remain calm. "Young master, I feel that your heart is beating faster. What's wrong with you? Quickly let me out." Luoluo felt that something was wrong with Yixian and hurriedly said, "It's nothing. Just stay here." Yixian was sweating and hurriedly comforted her. If Luoluo saw the naked Crown Prince, she would probably beat him to death. Eye of control. This concubine's strength wasn't strong. She was only in the 8th stage of the Supreme Being realm. She was easily controlled by Yixian. "Put on your clothes and wait at the side," Yixian said to the concubine. "Yes." The concubine nodded. She took out a cloak from her spatial ring and put it on before walking to the side. The Crown Prince also stood up and put on his clothes. Do you still have the heartbreak fruit you bought at the auction? Yixian asked directly. Yes. The Crown Prince nodded. Chapter 927. The Crown Prince immediately took out the heartbreak fruit from his interspatial ring and handed it to Yixian. The moment Yixian took the heartbreak fruit, his hand couldn't help but tremble. Ding! The Eye of Dissection has been successfully activated. A system notification rang out. The Eye of Dissection was a very unique heavenly eye. It could dissect an opponent's attacks, weapons, and even the opponent's body. This Eye of Dissection looks very powerful. The amount of eye power it consumes is probably not to be underestimated. Yixian decided to give it a try. He immediately turned his head and looked at the big mouth where the Crown Prince and his concubine had fought for 300 rounds. Eye of Dissection. 2 invisible rays shot out from Yixian's eyes and hit the big mouth. In the next moment, the big mouth began to rapidly disintegrate into ashes. So powerful. And the amount of eye power it consumes is much less than the Eye of the Void. Yixian was overjoyed. Young master, I want to see it too. Luo Luo shouted in his mind. Alright. Yixian let Luo Luo out and then took out an upper-grade sovereign weapon. Eye of Dissection. The 2 invisible rays hit the upper-grade sovereign weapon. In the next moment, the upper-grade sovereign weapon began to disintegrate, and in less than a second it turned into ashes. It seemed that the speed of disintegration was related to the strength of the object being disintegrated. Wow, even an upper-grade sovereign weapon was disintegrated. So powerful. Luo Luo's eyes widened. An upper-grade sovereign weapon was stronger than a 9th Tribulation Supremacy's golden sovereign body. However, Yixian disintegrated it in a second. It was really terrifying. The Crown Prince and his concubine were also dumbfounded and hurriedly swallowed their saliva. Although the 2 disintegration rays were invisible to the naked eye, they could feel that if they hit a person, even a 9th Tribulation Supremacy would die. Now, Yixian had the confidence to contend with the retired emperor of the Royal Sacred Dynasty. After all, he still had a chance to advance. Of course, this was only what he thought. To be safe, it was best to advance to the peak of the 9th Tribulation Supremacy. Very good. Yixian nodded in satisfaction. Then, he took the Crown Prince's and the concubine's universe rings and took everything away. Let me ask you, is your grandfather in the Imperial City? Yixian asked. He seems to have gone out. I don't know when he'll be back. The Crown Prince shook his head. Yixian felt a little helpless. After all, that old man was the retired emperor. Even if he returned, he couldn't report to the Crown Prince. At this moment, Yixian's gaze landed on the concubine again. He asked, Why did you call me Lord Messenger just now? He found it very strange because most people would be at a loss when they saw the scene just now. However, this concubine seemed to have thought of something. She didn't even wear clothes and ran over naked to kneel. Clearly there was something fishy. I thought Master came from that place. The concubine said with a red face. Where? Yixian raised an eyebrow. Master, she thinks you're from the Holy Land. The Crown Prince suddenly said. Holy Land. This was the first time Yixian had heard of this term. However, he could guess that this Holy Land was definitely more powerful than the Royal Sacred Dynasty. What kind of place is the Holy Land? Tell me in detail. Yixian asked again. The Holy Land is a secret realm. My Bloodcliff continent is a continent under the Bloodcliff sect. At the same time, our Bloodcliff continent isn't the only one. There are many other continents. Simply put, the Bloodcliff continent is a place to send geniuses to the Holy Land. The Crown Prince explained. What, there's more than one Bloodcliff continent? Yixian was shocked. Not only that, even Luo Luo was shocked. That's right. Our Blood Granite continent is the smallest. So the Holy Land sent Manifestation Realm experts to begin pushing the islands around the Blood Granite continent and merging them together. As a result, our current Blood Granite continent is growing larger and larger. The Crown Prince nodded. Wanxiang Realm. Merging the islands with the Bloodcliff continent? Yixian raised an eyebrow. Above the Supreme Being was the 3 minor disasters of the Supreme Being realm, and above that was the Wanxiang Realm. He didn't expect that after reaching the Wanxiang Realm, he could actually move islands. It was too terrifying. At that moment, Yixian suddenly thought of Earth. The Bloodcliff continent under his feet was like Asia. The Wanxiang realm experts thought that Asia was too small, so they merged the surrounding islands into Asia. Of course, although the 7 continents on Earth weren't connected, they were all called the Blood Cliff continent. For example, they were responsible for sending geniuses to the Blood Cliff sect. How can one enter the Blood Cliff sect? Yixian asked again. Only those who meet the entry requirements can enter the Holy Land. Of course, if you obtain the Blood Cliff scattered around the Blood Cliff continent, you can also exchange it for a spot to enter the Holy Land. The Crown Prince replied. Blood Cliff, huh? Yixian narrowed his eyes. Suddenly Yixian thought of the Yinyang Patriarch. That Yinyang Patriarch should be from the Holy Land. Then what are the entry requirements of the Blood Cliff sect? Yixian continued to ask. Reach the peak of the Supreme Being 9th level at the age of 20. The Crown Prince answered without thinking. F***CK. Hearing this, Yixian fainted. He was already 24 years old, but he was only in the middle of the Supreme Being 9th level. Perhaps only Luo Luo had this qualification. How many sects are there in the Holy Land? What level of power is the Blood Cliff sect in the Holy Land? Yixian asked again. Many, probably more than the countries on the Blood Cliff continent. Every power has many continents under their control, and the Blood Cliff sect is considered the lowest level. The Crown Prince replied. There are more powers in the Holy Land than countries, and the Blood Cliff sect is only the lowest level. Yixian was so shocked that he prostrated himself on the ground. He estimated that any random sect in the Holy Land would be able to sweep across the Blood Cliff continent. After all, the entry requirement for the Blood Cliff sect was to reach the peak of the Supreme Being 9th level before the age of 20. Then, do you have any Blood Cliff sect in the Royal Sacred Dynasty? Yixian continued to ask. Since they couldn't reach the entry requirements, they could only rely on the Blood Cliff sect to enter the Holy Land. There is one. My imperial grandfather paid a huge price to privately exchange for it from the Holy Land's emissary. The Crown Prince nodded. Really? Hearing this, Yixian revealed an overjoyed expression. Luo Luo breaking through to the peak of the Supreme Being 9th level before the age of 20 was a certainty. Moreover, she didn't even need to wait until the age of 20, she would be able to do it after a period of time. Therefore, it wasn't a big problem for her to enter the Blood Cliff sect. However, Yixian wouldn't be able to do it unless he broke through the 3 lesser disasters of the Supreme Being level. At this time, Yixian thought of another question and asked, if you want to use the Blood Cliff sect, who will you send in? My imperial grandfather will go in by himself, the Crown Prince replied. So selfish. Luo Luo couldn't help but ridicule. Chapter 928. Wait, your imperial grandfather exchanged for the Blood Rock. Does that mean there isn't much left in the national treasury? Yixian's heart skipped a beat, almost stopping. Yes. The Crown Prince nodded. F***CKU #Ynus% at B. Yixian couldn't help but curse. He originally wanted to control the emperor of the Royal Sacred Dynasty and empty the national treasury. He didn't expect the national treasury to be empty. However, Yixian calmed down when he thought about how the retired emperor used half of the national treasury to exchange for the Blood Rock. That Yinyang old ancestor is definitely in the Holy Lands. If I want to find the Judgment Scripture and Judgment Scripture, I have to enter the Holy Lands. Therefore, this Blood Rock must be exchanged. Yixian thought to himself. Although there wasn't much left in the national treasury, Yixian still had to make a trip there. He immediately asked the Crown Prince to lead the way to his father. The emperor of the Royal Sacred Dynasty was the ruler of a country. Naturally, his strength couldn't be too low. That was why he was at the peak of the 9th level Supreme Being. However, this wasn't worth mentioning to Yixian. Under the Crown Prince's lead, Yixian arrived at the Emperor's palace. Your Highness, the Emperor has already gone to bed. A peak 9th level Supreme Being expert stopped the Crown Prince. It's only 9 at night and you're already asleep. Didn't you say that you have a lot of things to attend to every day? Is this still the Emperor? Yixian glared at him. The peak 9th level Supreme Being expert frowned. In the next second he was controlled by Yixian. Your Highness, please follow me. The expert led Yixian and the Crown Prince into the palace. Because this was the imperial city, Yixian didn't dare to make a move. With the eye of revelation, he could see that there were many experts guarding the palace. Once he made a move, he would be exposed. Right, how many peak 9th level Supreme Being experts are there in the Imperial family? After entering the Emperor's palace, Yi Xian couldn't help but ask. Including my Imperial father, there are 10. The Crown Prince replied. Out of 10 peak 9th level Supreme Being experts, 3 were dispatched to destroy the Burning Sun Hall. Even the retired Emperor personally came was enough to prove the value of the rock. Soon Yi Xian arrived at the Emperor's residence. Father, something bad has happened. The Crown Prince shouted anxiously outside the palace. After a while, the palace door opened, and a middle-aged man with a goatee walked out. What happened? The Emperor said in surprise when he saw the Crown Prince standing outside the door. At this moment, Yi Xian had already released Luo. As soon as the Emperor finished speaking, the two of them had already started fighting. Burning Eye. Charm. Eye of Control. These 3 moves were enough to control a person at the peak of the Supreme Martial Artist level 9. However, what surprised Yi Xian was that the Emperor actually resisted the first Eye of Control. Not good, there are thorns. The Emperor immediately spoke. But at this moment, Yi Xian hurriedly used the second round. Ding! Control successful. When the notification sounded, Yi Xian quickly rushed in again because there was another woman inside. She should be the Empress. The Empress was only at the peak of the Supreme Martial Artist level, so she was easily controlled by Yi Xian. Has the retired Emperor returned? Yi Xian still asked the same question. No. He went to destroy the Burning Sun Hall and hasn't returned yet. The Emperor shook his head. Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief and said, Bring me to the Imperial Treasury. Yes, the Emperor replied. He immediately put on his clothes and brought Yi Xian to the Imperial Treasury. A high-grade Holy Dynasty's Imperial Treasury was enough to make anyone go crazy. However, at this moment, the Imperial Sacred Dynasty's Imperial Treasury didn't have much left. It was barely enough to run the entire dynasty. If another Holy Dynasty attacked, the Imperial Sacred Dynasty might not have enough funds to fight. However, if the retired Emperor entered the Blood Rock sect, the Imperial Sacred Dynasty would naturally rise in power. The other high-grade Holy Dynasties wouldn't dare to start a war. I can't break through to the peak of the Supreme Martial Artist level. If I hadn't exchanged for that Blood Rock, I would have been able to. Yi Xian was slightly helpless. The current him didn't have the confidence to fight the retired Emperor. At the same time, he didn't know what happened to the people from the Burning Sun Hall. No matter what, this enmity must be avenged. Yi Xian's eyes flickered, filled with killing intent. That night, the Imperial Palace seemed to be peaceful, but in reality a huge change had happened. In order to destroy the Burning Sun Hall, the Emperor sent 3 peak 9th venerables. Therefore, including the Emperor, there were 7 peak 9th venerables in the Imperial Palace. The Emperor was also among the 7, and they were all secretly controlled by Yi Xian. As for the others, they were all charmed by Luo. Now they just had to wait for the retired Emperor to return. That night, Yi Xian hid by the Crown Prince's side. If the retired Emperor returned, the Emperor would immediately send someone to inform him. At noon the next day, Luo began to undergo her tribulation. 9th level supremacy tribulation. It wasn't a rare thing to undergo tribulation in the Imperial Palace. Everyone thought that it was the Crown Prince's subordinate who was undergoing tribulation. Luo had full confidence in this 9th level supremacy tribulation. After 9 consecutive tribulations, Luo broke through to the 9th level supremacy tribulation. After Luo broke through to the 9th level supremacy tribulation, Yi Xian's confidence increased greatly. With Luo's current level, she was invincible among the supremacies even if she didn't use the Fallen Star Whip. If she used the Fallen Star Whip and assisted Yi Xian, the two of them should be able to fight the retired Emperor. Old man, we've been waiting for your return. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, not bothering to hide the killing intent in them. However, it was really a coincidence that not long after Luo broke through, the Emperor sent someone to deliver the news. The team that went to the Burning Sun Hall has returned? After receiving the news, Yi Xian couldn't help but shudder. I wonder what happened to the Burning Sun Hall? Were they destroyed or captured? Master, the people from the Burning Sun Hall and the Absolute Palace have all been captured. The retired Emperor has also returned and ordered them to be beheaded at the entrance of the Imperial Palace at noon tomorrow. A peak ninth supremacy tribulation venerable reported to Yixian. All captured and beheaded at noon tomorrow? Yixian raised his eyebrows. It seemed like the retired emperor had obtained the sword-shaped stone. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done so. At the same time, Yixian also understood what the retired emperor wanted to do. Kill the chicken to warn the monkey. The Burning Sun Hall and the Absolute Yin Palace were audacious and dared to go against the Imperial Palace. Therefore, the retired emperor wanted to intimidate the other powers in the Imperial Palace before he went to the Blood Rock sect. Where are those people locked up? Yixian hurriedly asked. They are locked up in the Imperial prison. There are more than 10,000 of them. The Venerable continued to report. More than 10,000 people. This caused Yixian's heart to tremble. Chapter 929. Not only was Luoluo angry, but so was Yixian. Although there were people from the Juyin Palace, the majority of them were from the Burning Sun Hall. The retired emperor could have killed the higher-ups of the two sects, but there was no need for him to kill the disciples. So many of my fellow disciples will be executed in public at noon tomorrow. No, we can't let him succeed. Yixian's eyes flashed. Where is that old man now? After the retired emperor came back, he went straight back. He should be going into seclusion. The consecrator continued. Seclusion? Very well, bring me to the heavenly prison. Yixian said coldly. Since that old man wasn't here, he could save Lin Zhantian and the others and fight against that old man together. That old man probably wouldn't have thought that the entire palace was under Yixian's control, including his own son and grandson. Naturally, he wouldn't have thought that the people he just captured would be released immediately. However, before going to the heavenly prison, Yixian went to find the emperor and asked him to lead him personally. Under the emperor's lead, Yixian quickly arrived at the heavenly prison. Welcome, Your Majesty. The 3 Ninth Supremes who were sent to suppress the Burning Sun Hall were the guards of the heavenly prison. When they saw the emperor, they quickly knelt down. However, the moment they knelt down, Yixian suddenly walked out from the corner. I have control. Before the 3 Ninth Supremes could react, they were all controlled by Yixian. Now, the 10 Ninth Supremes in the Royal Sacred Dynasty were all servants of Yixian. At that moment, Yixian quickly rushed to the deepest part of the heavenly prison. More than 10,000 people from the Burning Sun Hall and the Juyin Palace were imprisoned here. However, because their Qiankuan rings were taken away and their bodies were sealed, they couldn't even open the door, let alone break through the heavenly prison's array. Hall Master. At this moment, Yixian had already reached the deepest part of the heavenly prison. He directly shouted towards the inside. Near the entrance of the heavenly prison was a group of Burning Sun Hall disciples, but there was an elder among them. It's you? This Burning Sun Hall elder was very surprised. Why are you here? I've infiltrated the imperial city. Elder, I'll let you out first. Without another word, Yixian opened the door and removed the shackles from the elder's hands. When the incinerating Sun Hall Master and the others heard the commotion, they hastily squeezed through the crowd and walked out. Yixian, it's actually you. The incinerating Sun Hall Master was astonished. Palace Master, I'm very sorry for that day. If I hadn't left, I probably wouldn't have been able to escape death. Yixian said guiltily. He removed the shackles from the Burning Sun Hall Master's hands and asked, Where is the Patriarch? Being asked this question, the Burning Sun Hall Master revealed an aggrieved expression. Master and Master were killed by that old man. Dead. Yixian raised his eyebrows, but it made sense. Lin Zhantian and that red-clothed lady were both Ninth Supreme being peak and posed a threat to the imperial family, so they were killed first. Palace Master, don't worry. I will kill that old man and avenge the Patriarch and Master. Yixian said with righteous indignation. Now I'll let you out first. No, there are so many of us. Once we are let out, we will definitely be discovered by the imperial family. When that time comes, that old man will come out again and none of us will be able to leave. The Burning Sun Hall Master directly refused. He really thought that Yixian had infiltrated the imperial city. However, he definitely wouldn't have thought that the entire imperial palace was already under Yixian's control. No, the entire imperial palace is now under my control. After Yixian finished speaking, he turned around and said, Everyone, come here. The next scene would be unforgettable for the Burning Sun Hall Master. The boorish man and the other two ninth-stage supreme martial artists, who had threatened to destroy the Burning Sun Palace Hall, appeared in front of the Burning Sun Palace Hall master. Not only that, there was also a middle-aged man wearing a dragon robe and a golden crown behind him. If these people were to combine their auras together, it would be enough to intimidate the 10,000 people in the imperial prison. However, the best part was yet to come. With the emperor in the lead, these people quickly walked behind Yixian and then all of them knelt down. "Master!" they shouted in unison. This sentence scared the hell out of the Burning Sun Hall master. "Palace master, after I left that day, I infiltrated the imperial palace and took control of all these people. Right now, there's only that old man in the imperial palace. He has no helpers," Yixian explained. "What?" When the Burning Sun Hall master and the 10,000 people behind him heard this, they were so shocked that they could swallow a quail egg. Controlling the emperor of the royal sacred dynasty? At this moment, the Burning Sun Hall master's gaze swept across a person. It was a cute girl with 3 white tails. The Burning Sun Hall master also recognized her. She was one of the disciples of the deceased elder Han Ming. She was also Yixian's follower Luo Luo. The Fox Charm clan was born with the ability to charm others. However, it was a little unrealistic to charm a few Ninth Supreme Being experts. However, it was only now that the Burning Sun Hall master realized that Yixian's aura wasn't any weaker than his. Even Luo Luo was an early Ninth Supreme Being. Gulp. The Burning Sun Hall master finally understood how heaven-defying the two of them were. The eldest senior brother of the Burning Sun Hall was also a Ninth Tribulation Supreme Being. However, he was already over 35 years old. Furthermore, he died under the palm of the retired emperor together with the palace master of the Absolute Yin Palace. However, in front of Luo Luo and Yixian, the eldest senior brother of the Burning Sun Hall wasn't even worth mentioning. He was completely like an ant. "Is this true?" An old man beside him reacted. He was the vice palace master of the Burning Sun Hall, and was also one of Lin Zhantian's disciples. Facing this question, Yixian also felt a little helpless. The truth was already in front of him, yet he was still asking if it was true? Could it be that the few Ninth Supreme Being experts behind him were fake? "It's true. The entire imperial city is now under my control. That old man should have taken the sword-shaped stone and gone into seclusion. Therefore, he won't know that I let you guys out." Yixian nodded solemnly. "Good. This is really good. Oh my god. I thought that we were going to die tomorrow. Let's go. While that old man isn't here, let's leave quickly." A group of Burning Sun Hall's disciples shouted. Not only that, even the female disciples of the Absolute Yin Palace revealed a look of hope. "Alright, let's go," the Burning Sun Hall master replied. There were a total of 12,000 people in this huge imperial prison. Their Qian Kuan rings had all fallen into the hands of the imperial family. To be more precise, they had all been counted and kept in the imperial treasury. Chapter 930. Very soon the 10,000 people escaped from the prison. The imperial guards outside were dumbfounded as they stared at each other. In such a situation they should have taken out their weapons, but the one who released the prisoners was the emperor. What could they say? Tens of thousands of disciples from various sects appeared in the imperial city. The scale of the scene left everyone dumbfounded. "Palace master, you all leave first. I will deal with that old man," Yixian said to the Burning Sun Palace master. "Yixian, revenge is a dish best served cold. But that old man has already surpassed the Supreme Being realm. Even if we work together, we won't be a match for him," the Burning Sun Palace master said worriedly. "It's fine. I will let them launch a sneak attack. That old man will never expect his son to do such a thing. When the time comes, let's see if he will kill or not," Yixian said with a slight smile. In fact, he was going to kill the retired emperor, but he didn't want to worry the Burning Sun Palace master and the others. Good, this is a good plan. His own son has betrayed him. Let's see if he can put righteousness before family. The Burning Sun Hall master's eyes lit up. The disciples of Burning Sun Hall and Absolute Yin Palace behind him also had their eyes lit up as they cheered loudly. The emperor and the others were Yixian's servants. No one would expect them to launch a sneak attack on the retired emperor. At that time, if the retired emperor were to kill them in a fit of rage, it would be fun. Unfortunately, they wouldn't be able to witness such a scene. Yixian, be careful. You are the future of our Burning Sun Palace Master. One of the elders reminded. Yixian and Luo controlled the emperor and peak experts of a high-ranked holy dynasty. With them around, the Burning Sun Palace Master could sit back and relax. Of course, the prerequisite was that they didn't die. I will. Yixian nodded. Then, he ordered the crown prince, who was charmed by Luo to lead the 10,000 people away. As for him, he began to reorganize the troops. The 9 peak supremes of the royal sacred dynasty, including the emperor, were all under Yixian's control. When the time came for them to launch a sneak attack, even if the retired emperor was an expert of fleshly body disaster, he probably wouldn't be able to react in time, right? Young master, are we going over? Luo asked. Go. When the time comes, hide nearby and wait until the ambush is over before making a move. Yixian nodded and replied. This time he was very determined. After all, this time his original body and avatar were going out together. After making the necessary preparations, Yixian led the emperor's group of 10 towards the place where the retired emperor was in seclusion. Not long after they arrived. This was an inconspicuous palace in the imperial city, but this was a forbidden area, and no one was allowed to enter. Following that, Yixian ordered the 10 emperors to move closer to the retired emperor while he, his doppelganger, and Luo hid nearby. As long as they didn't show themselves, they wouldn't attract the retired emperor's attention. The emperor brought the 9 supreme martial artists with him and approached the palace. Then he said, Father, bad news. Those people you captured have been rescued by an expert. Since they were going to launch a sneak attack, they naturally had to put on an act. Since the retired emperor had obtained the sword-shaped stone, he was naturally in the midst of comprehending it. If he could comprehend the sword force, then he would be a big shot. However, this seclusion wasn't a very important matter. If he wanted to, he could do so. Therefore, the retired emperor quickly walked out. What's going on? An aged voice resounded. The retired emperor finally showed himself. He wanted to use the Burning Sun Palace and the Absolute Palace as a warning to others, but now they were actually rescued by someone. This was a slap to his face. Father, this is the letter left behind by the mysterious expert. The emperor didn't say much and directly passed the letter over. The retired emperor stretched out his withered hand and was about to receive the letter, but at this moment, the sound of wind suddenly appeared. Huff, huff, huff. The 10 people, including the emperor, all made their move. 10 supreme martial artists simultaneously launched a sneak attack. Even if the retired emperor was an expert of the mortal body disaster, he still couldn't react in time. What? The retired emperor's eyes widened. The 10 people were very close to him, and the emperor was right beside him. Therefore, the sneak attack this time all landed on him. A martial artist cultivated the sovereign golden body, and the first of the 3 sovereign disasters was the mortal body. The retired emperor's mortal body had far surpassed everyone's imagination. The 10 supreme martial artists' full-strength sneak attack actually couldn't kill him, and only caused him light injuries. The retired emperor's sovereign golden body was useless, but the defense of his mortal body was much stronger than the sovereign golden body. However, all of this was within Yixian's expectations. Even if he was only an expert of the mortal body disaster, 10 supreme martial artists wouldn't be able to contend against him. The retired emperor was very puzzled by the sneak attack of his own son, but when he saw Yixian's 3 figures, he understood. You actually charmed them, you're courting death. He roared, and his aura instantly soared. Just as his voice rang out, the 10 people around him were sent flying, and then he rushed towards Yixian. In fact, Yixian was still a little disappointed. If the 10 people had seriously injured the retired emperor, then their chances of victory would be much higher. An expert of the mortal body disaster is indeed different. Their speed is actually much faster than mine. Yixian secretly swallowed his saliva, and at the same time his eyes flashed, and immediately attacked from several thousand meters away. Burning Eye. Forbidden Eye of Illusion. Charm. This battle was very important. If they lost, there was a high possibility that they would die. Therefore, Yixian and Luo were extremely alert. At the same time, 6 flying swords attacked the retired emperor. It's just an illusion and a mental attack. This old man has lived for nearly 100 years, so how can my mental strength be something you can imagine? The retired emperor coldly snorted and raised his hand to slash out with his sword. This slash was enough to kill any supreme martial artist. However, Yi Xian's attack wasn't just for show. Flowing Shadow Sword. Yi Xian, who was holding the supreme martial artist's shadowless sword, also slashed out. This slash was also enough to kill any supreme martial artist. Boom! The two attacks collided and shockwaves rolled out. In the end, Yi Xian was at a disadvantage. However, one shouldn't forget that Yi Xian still had a doppelganger. Adding the doppelganger's attack, it was just right. A supreme martial artist's spiritual treasure is indeed extraordinary. To actually be able to block my attack. However, the supreme martial artist's spiritual treasure will soon be mine. The retired emperor's eyes were filled with greed. Even the powerful imperial family couldn't create a supreme martial artist's spiritual treasure. Back then, the 10,000 Swords Manor had coincidentally obtained 3 supreme martial artists' spiritual treasure blueprints, which allowed them to create a sword embryo. However, they couldn't create a complete supreme martial artist's spiritual treasure. Yi Xian was only able to create the Shadowless Sword and Fallen Star Whip because he had the Devouring system. If you want my supreme martial artist's spiritual treasure, then let's see if you have the strength. Chapter 931. In the next moment, the 6 flying swords attacked the retired emperor. At the same time, the 10 Ninth Supreme Being experts also rushed over quickly. Burning Eye. Forbidden Eye of Illusion. Yi Xian's original body and doppelganger took turns to use it. Even though there was a difference of a small realm and a large realm between them, it was fine as long as it was effective. At this moment, the two sides had already come into contact. The retired emperor, who was at the first grade of human body disaster, had a physique much stronger than Yi Xian's. Even though the latter had a 70% increase in agility, he still couldn't beat his opponent. Fortunately, they had the advantage in numbers. Boom! 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 The two sides were engaged in an intense battle of vital energy. In this aspect, Yi Xian was slightly better. After all, his original body and doppelganger could block the opponent's attacks. Luoluo, on the other hand, could use the Fallen Star Whip to attack. In addition, she had the 6 flying swords and 10 backup. What an annoying girl. The retired emperor also coveted the Fallen Star Whip. After dodging an attack, he actually reached out to grab it. Unexpectedly, with a bang, the retired emperor's left hand was drenched in blood as it was knocked away. Luoluo's attack just now didn't hit him, so he didn't know that the Fallen Star Whip had such an effect. Good chance. Seeing this, Yi Xian hurriedly reminded Luoluo. At the same time, his eyes flashed rapidly. Eye of Nirvana. Demonic Fox Flash. After the retired emperor failed once, Yi Xian found an opportunity. Immediately, he saw 2 flashes of light, one silver and one white with golden threads. Xiu! Xiu! The 2 flashes of light flashed past. The retired emperor dodged Luoluo's demonic fox flash, but was struck by the more powerful Eye of Nirvana. Fortunately, he blocked it at the critical moment with the high-grade Supreme Divine Weapon in his hand. A high-grade Supreme Divine Weapon was even harder than a 9th Supreme Being's golden sovereign body. The Eye of Nirvana couldn't break it. However, the impact was so strong that even the retired emperor's right hand trembled. What a powerful attack. If my body was hit, I would at least be seriously injured. Cold sweat broke out on the retired emperor's forehead. Although he had been hit, he used the force of the impact to distance himself from Yi Xian. However, he had neglected one thing. His current situation was that he was surrounded by a fierce tiger in front of him and a jackal behind him. Behind him, there were 6 flying swords and 10 Ninth Supreme Martial Artist peak allies. Xiu! 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 Countless attacks were launched at him. Even though his speed was fast, it was inevitable that he would be hit a few times. Fortunately, his physical body was much stronger than the sovereign golden body, so he only suffered light injuries. You do have some ability. If I want to get rid of you, I have to be ruthless. Yi Xian's expression froze. Now he made a decision in his heart. Ding! Heavenly Eye God Race Bloodline Evolution successful. The system prompted. He still had some advancement points, which he obtained from killing a devourer beast in the Fox Charm Holy Dynasty's breeding ground. He had been keeping it as a backup. Today, He would use it to strengthen his Heavenly Eye clan bloodline. Immediately, the effect of all the Heaven's Eyes increased by a notch. Fuse. Since it was only the bloodline of his original body that had evolved, he still needed to fuse with it. After fusing with it, his combat power increased by another 10%. Burning Eye. Forbidden Eye of Illusion. This time the retired emperor could no longer remain calm. Since just now the burning eye had been tormenting his mind. He was in great pain but he endured it. But now, the power of the burning eye had increased by more than a little. The retired emperor, who was burned by the burning eye, couldn't help but let out a low cry of pain. In this battle, Yi Xian was in peak condition except for a little consumption of his eye power. However, the retired emperor's body had suffered a few light injuries, and his mental injuries were even more severe, so the situation was not good. His face was gloomy, and he made a decision in his heart. Kill. 10 Ninth Supreme Martial Artists were harassing him, which was very disadvantageous for him, so he had to be ruthless. Immediately, he turned around and attacked the 10 people behind him in a frenzy. His attack speed was very fast. After all, he was a first-grade human body disaster super expert. In the blink of an eye, countless sword rays flashed. Hiss! 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 A series of crisp sounds rang out as the retired emperor killed 6 Ninth Supreme Martial Artists in an instant. Vicious and merciless indeed. Yi Xian shuddered. Back then, the retired emperor's giant palm not only killed a large number of experts from the Burning Sun Palace and Absolutine Palace, but also killed many of his own people. So this time Yi Xian quickly calmed down. Due to the retired emperor's powerful physique, if he wanted to seriously injure him, he could only use the disintegration eye, which was harder to defend against. Luoluo, prepare for close combat. Yi Xian suddenly said. Okay. Luoluo immediately nodded, indicating that she understood. They had already discussed a countermeasure before this. Immediately, Luoluo used a secret technique to forcibly increase her strength, which was to start burning that tuft of golden hair. This time she had no choice but to use her trump card. Otherwise it would be hard to say who would win. After feeling Luoluo's sudden increase in strength, the retired emperor's expression became more serious. It seemed that he had to show some of his true strength. Mystic Moon Slash. The retired emperor raised his right hand and slashed towards Luoluo. This was his unique technique. If he had used this technique at the start, Yi Xian would have to use the Eye of the Void to block it. Not good. Yi Xian could see that this technique was extraordinary, so he immediately thought of something. In the next moment, Luoluo disappeared from everyone's sight and reappeared next to Yi Xian. What? The retired emperor was shocked and thought to himself, teleportation. Retrieving an object couldn't be considered a true teleportation because there was a distance to retrieve it. Furthermore, Luoluo could only appear next to Yi Xian. However, using this technique to help Luoluo dodge the sword gleam was a good idea. After the attack failed, the retired emperor was caught up by Yi Xian and Luoluo. Now it was time to go all out because at such a close distance it was much harder to dodge the attack. Demon Fox Flash. After getting closer, Luoluo used her unique technique again. A white light flashed towards the retired emperor, but he blocked it with his sword. However, Luoluo didn't only have the Demon Fox Flash, she also had the Demon Fox clone. Boom! A shockwave swept out. The retired emperor thought that he had succeeded, but he didn't expect that it was just a clone. At the same time, Yi Xian finally activated a technique that he had just learned. Disintegration Eye. 2 invisible energy rays shot towards the retired emperor. These 2 rays couldn't be seen with the naked eye, but they could be felt. Sizzle. The 2 rays landed on the retired emperor's weapon. Just as the retired emperor was about to scoff at this attack, he realized that his weapon had started to disintegrate into countless tiny particles. Chapter 932. In the blink of an eye, only half of the high-grade Supreme Divine Weapon was left, and it was still rapidly withering. This scene frightened the retired emperor so much that he hurriedly threw away the weapon in his hand. But at this moment, Eye of Nirvana! Eye of Nirvana! Meteor Strike! Yi Xian's original body and clone attacked together, and Luoluo also used the powerful whip technique she had learned from the inherited memories. This time, even if the retired emperor didn't die, he would be reduced to skin. Pung! Pung! The retired emperor dodged one of the Eye of Nirvana, but he was struck in the chest by the other one. Not only that, he was also struck in the back by Lolo's whip. The two powerful attacks collided, and he couldn't help but spurt out a mouthful of blood. His chest and back were already in a mess, and blood was spurting out, making him look extremely ferocious. After fighting for so long, he was finally heavily injured. An expert of human body disaster actually has such a powerful physique. The Eye of Nirvana is actually unable to kill him. Yi Xian was shocked. One must know that a casual attack from him could cut a peak supreme divine warrior in half. The Eye of Nirvana's attack was stronger than his sword intent attack, but it was only able to heavily injure his opponent. This was enough to prove that his opponent had a powerful physique. However, the battle was about to end. The retired emperor, who had suffered 2 attacks in addition to the mental damage, had lost at least 40% of his battle prowess. Eye of Nirvana! Eye of Nirvana! Demonic fox flash. 3 cold lights lit up at the same time. The retired emperor, who was heavily injured, didn't have the ability to dodge the 3 attacks coming from different directions, and was instantly struck by them. Can't do. The retired emperor's mouth that was full of blood couldn't help but open as he spat out 3 words. These were the last words he would say in his life. The 3 attacks all landed on his body, crushing his heart. Lolo's demonic fox flash directly cut off his head. The retired emperor, who was at the first layer of human body disaster, finally died. Pudong! His head fell to the ground, but because his chest and back were heavily injured, the blood didn't spurt too high. Pudong! Another muffled sound, and the corpse fell to the ground. Huff huff! Looking at the corpse of the retired emperor, Yi Xian and Luo Luo both heaved a sigh of relief. Luo Luo's hair also returned to its original state. That old bastard is finally dead. We've finally avenged our master. Luo Luo was immediately overjoyed. He is truly difficult to deal with. If he had a supreme spiritual treasure, I'm afraid we would all die here today. Yi Xian also broke out in cold sweat. Now that the retired emperor was dead, his interspatial ring belonged to Yi Xian. Yi Xian hurried over and removed the retired emperor's Qian Kuan ring. As the strongest cultivator in the royal sacred dynasty, the retired emperor didn't need to hide his wealth. Hence, this Qian Kuan ring was his entire fortune. Yi Xian emptied the contents into his devouring space and quickly checked them. At this moment, there was a red stone in his devour space. Blood rock. Is this the blood rock? The pass to enter the Holy Lands? Yi Xian took out the blood rock and examined it. With this blood rock he could enter the Holy Lands. Luo Luo would soon have the qualifications to enter the Holy Lands as long as she broke through to the peak of the 9th Supremacy Realm. Now that he had avenged his master and obtained the blood rock, this matter was finally settled. However, just as Yi Xian was about to go wild with joy, ding! Discovered devouring origin. Suddenly, a system notification rang out, causing Yi Xian to freeze in place. What was the origin of devouring? However, just by hearing the name, it was definitely related to the devouring system. While Yi Xian was still pondering, the system notification rang out again. Devouring origin can be used to upgrade the devouring system. Do you wish to upgrade it? When Yi Xian heard this notification, he couldn't help but shudder. Upgrade the devouring system? Young master, what's wrong with you? Luo Luo asked anxiously when she sensed Yi Xian's abnormality. Yi Xian ignored Luo Luo's question. No, it was as if he didn't hear her at all. He quickly scanned his surroundings and realized that there was a strange stone in the universe ring of the retired emperor. The pattern on the stone was exactly the same as the pattern on the devouring beast. Devouring origin. Upgrade. He immediately replied. What a joke. If the devouring system could be upgraded, it would naturally be upgraded. Unless his brain was fried. Ding! The devouring system is upgrading. The current progress is 1%. The system notification rang out. At the same time, a panel appeared. The progress bar had risen to 1%. The progress bar rose very slowly. It didn't rise by 1% even after a few seconds. However, it wasn't surprising. After all, it was an upgrade system. Even a computer required a lot of time to reinstall its system. What more the devouring system? Yi Xian waited quietly for a minute. However, he realized that the progress bar was still at 1%. It seemed that the devouring system wouldn't be upgraded so quickly. Luo, this young master has struck gold this time. Yixian couldn't help but exclaim. Even though she didn't know how he had struck gold, Luo could tell from Yixian's expression that Yixian was overjoyed. Congratulations, young master. Luo smiled. The stronger Yixian was, the happier she was. This was the self-cultivation of a human. This time it was out of Yixian's expectations. He actually obtained a devouring origin. This was the first time he had heard of this name. However, he never expected that it could be used to upgrade the devouring system. He wondered what kind of functions the devouring system would have after the upgrade. The devouring origin had already been used by Yixian to upgrade the devouring system. However, Yixian quickly took out a pen and paper and asked the emperor, "Have you seen this pattern before?" The emperor and the other 3 people looked at it and shook their heads. The devouring origin was usually found on the devouring beast. Now that they had the devouring origin, they could expand their search range in the future. Hurry up and give the order for the entire Sage dynasty to search for this symbol. Inform me as soon as you find anything. Yixian said to the emperor. Yes, master. The emperor nodded. He didn't even look at his father's corpse and left immediately. Even though the battle was intense, this was a forbidden area. No one was allowed to enter. Hence, no one knew that the retired emperor had fallen. While the devouring system was still being upgraded, Yixian entered the retired emperor's palace. He scanned the place with his eye of revelation but didn't find anything hidden. Chapter 933. Luo, hurry up and cultivate. Once you reach the peak of the 9th Supreme, we will go to the Holy Land. Yixian said to Luo. And okay. Luo also understood why Yixian wanted to go to the Holy Land. Moreover, with their strength, they were almost invincible in the Blood Cliff continent. Therefore, they had to go to a higher place. However, Luo was only at the early 9th Supreme level. If she wanted to reach the peak of the 9th Supreme level, she would need at least a month. This was a conservative estimate. Now that everything was settled, Yixian and Luo could go into seclusion. Their clone could also go back to the eastern continent to visit and report their safety. Yixian stayed in the retired emperor's palace. In the following time, he kept looking at the progress bar in his mind. After an hour, the progress bar only increased by 1%. It seemed that it would take more than 4 days for the devouring system to finish upgrading. There were still many good things in the retired emperor's yin and yang ring, but they were not enough for Yixian to break through, so Yixian gave them all to Luo. Luo had the effect of the beast god bloodline. Her cultivation speed was as fast as a rocket. She cultivated for a day, which was equivalent to cultivating for more than 10 days. Very quickly for days passed. Soon, the devouring system will finish upgrading soon. In a corner of the royal sacred dynasty, Yixian sat on the ground anxiously. At this time, the progress bar in his mind had already reached 99%. Just a little more and the devouring system would finish upgrading. Half an hour later. Ding! The devouring system has been upgraded. Ding! The sword god bloodline has been upgraded. Ding! The beast god bloodline has been upgraded. Ding! The tree of life bloodline has been upgraded. Ding! The Gemini bloodline has been upgraded. Ding! The heavenly Eye clan bloodline has been upgraded. The continuous notifications almost made Yixian faint. The devouring system had been upgraded. Not only that, it had also upgraded all 5 of his bloodlines. After the upgrade, the perception of the sword god bloodline was increased by 60%, and the power of the sword skills was also increased by 60%. His beast god bloodline strength increased to 4, agility increased to 8, monster growth speed, monster attribute and monster expansion all increased to 4, Beast King's deterrence and devour increased to 5, and even Beast King's rage, which he hadn't used for a long time, increased to 6. In the virtual god realm, one had to rely on ultimacy, territory and emperor's will. In the supreme realm, one had to rely on sword will and sovereign golden body. Hence, the Beast King's rage was of little use. However, if he reached the 3 lesser disasters of the supreme martial artist, then the Beast King's rampage should be able to be used as a trump card again. The human body disaster of the 3 sovereign disasters mainly focused on increasing one's physique. Thus, the Beast King rampage could be put to good use again. The The Beast God bloodline had improved the most, and the Tree of Life bloodline's recovery speed and detoxification ability had also improved by 3 times. The Heavenly Eye God race had used the Devour points to upgrade twice. In addition to the Devour points given to him by the system this time, he had already upgraded to 4. But next it was time for the main event. Ding! Refining the second doppelganger. After hearing this notification, Yixian's body fiercely trembled. Second doppelganger? Previously, he had used the twin fruits to refine his first doppelganger. But now, with the system's upgrade, the advancement path that originally required 5 advancement points to upgrade had actually been upgraded once. Haha, a second doppelganger. Now I have 3 lives. Yixian's heart was already bursting with joy. His original body, first doppelganger, and second doppelganger were equivalent to having 3 lives. Not only that, but even the advancement path of combining doppelganger had been upgraded. Double combination increases my strength by 20%. Triple combination increases my strength by 30%? Unknowingly, Yixian's strength had increased by quite a bit. If his original body, first doppelganger and second doppelganger were to combine, then his strength would directly increase by 30%. Good, this is really good. From now on, I will leave one doppelganger in the Eastern continent to accompany my family, while my original body and the other doppelganger will go out and explore. Yixian immediately made his decision. Although 10% of his strength was not bad, he still needed to take care of his family and friends. Leaving one doppelganger in the Eastern continent was not only to accompany his family, but also to leave himself a way out. In the future, if his original body and first doppelganger were to die, then the second doppelganger would be his original body. At least he would not die. Ding! The second doppelganger has been successfully refined. The system notified. Yixian immediately summoned his second doppelganger. It doesn't matter whether the first doppelganger or the second doppelganger. The one going to the Eastern continent will be the second doppelganger. Yixian directly listed the second doppelganger as his first doppelganger. Ding! The twin bloodline has been successfully connected. The system notified again. This time Yixian was completely confused. What did the twin bloodline have been successfully connected mean? But in the next moment he understood. After the twin bloodline had been successfully connected, then in the future, when his original body devoured heaven and earth treasures, his doppelganger would also benefit and increase his cultivation base. In other words, even if Yixian devoured heaven and earth treasures now, his second doppelganger, who was on his way to the Eastern continent, would also increase his cultivation base. Simply put, the 3 doppelganger would share the same data. If one of them was to increase his cultivation base, the other 2 would be updated from time to time. Haha! This is going to be awesome. Yixian was already grinning from ear to ear. The upgraded system had brought him too many surprises. In the future, even if his doppelganger worked separately, he would be able to devour heaven and earth treasures directly without saving them for his original body. If his original body comprehended sword force, then the other 2 doppelganger would be able to use sword force even if they did not merge. This was the bloodline connection. The bloodline upgrade was completed, but the system notification continued. Ding! The exchange system has been upgraded. Ding! The forging system has been upgraded. Ding! The treasure system has been upgraded. Ding! The mission system has been activated. Ding! The treasure system has been activated. After 5 consecutive notifications, Yixian could not help but check the upgraded system. Originally, the exchange system was useless in the Tianshui continent. It could only be used to exchange for some small items such as equipment, which had to be forged by oneself. However, now that the exchange system had been upgraded, one could directly exchange for supreme divine weapons and supreme spiritual treasures. Previously, the currency was devouring crystals. Now, there was a new currency called super devouring crystals because of the new system. However, with Yixian's wealth, he couldn't even afford a single supreme spirit treasure. Originally, the forging system could forge weapons and armors as long as one had a forging blueprint. Now, after the upgrade, there were more tricks. For example, weapons could be tempered with mystical fire, and could be strengthened to create resonance sets. The resonance set was a set of equipment that would be much more powerful than before. Currently, Yixian could forge the Divine Sword set, Divine Beast set, and so on. However, there was a set called the Glorious set, which attracted Yixian's attention. These sets appeared according to the bloodline. The Divine Sword set and Divine Beast set naturally corresponded to the Divine Sword bloodline and Divine Beast bloodline. However, the Glorious set was the set of the Heavenly Eye clan's Glorious Eye. The Glorious Eye was a very powerful heavenly eye. After using it, one's chi would turn golden, and one would temporarily learn various powerful skills. The Glorious set was used to complement the Glorious Eye, and could greatly enhance the Glorious Eye's effect. Unfortunately, Yixian had never heard of the materials for these sets. It was not that he was ignorant but that they were too rare. Next was the treasure system. Yixian's Divine Beast bloodline could allow Yixian to have several treasure sets, but he felt that they were useless. His first treasure set was called Megatron, but it was burned to ashes by Jiang Tianjin's inextinguishable inferno. Chapter 934. After the upgrade, he could now level up the monster. However, the level up required Devour points, which were the original advancement points. It could also be considered as the corpse of a devouring beast. However, when Yixian saw the new function of the upgrade, his body trembled. Resurrection. The reincarnation system had an additional resurrection function. Heavens, it can actually resurrect a monster. Yixian opened his eyes wide and quickly glanced at the panel. He noticed that the first monster, Wei Zhentian, could be resurrected. Ding! As the system has been upgraded, the system host has one chance to resurrect a monster. The system notified. Hearing this, Yixian was so excited that he wanted to kiss it. He never expected that he would be given a chance to resurrect a monster. Young master, you're almost drooling from your smile. Luo suddenly appeared. Looking at Yixian's expression, she could not help but ridicule him. Haha, Luo, come and meet your companion. Yixian suddenly laughed. In the next moment, he used the chance to resurrect a monster. Ding! Wei Zhentian's resurrection is successful. When the notification sounded, a fist-sized green stone appeared on Yixian's shoulder. Ba ji! At this moment, the small stone suddenly jumped and extended its many arms and legs. Wei Zhentian, long time no see. Yixian was so moved that he was about to cry. Back then, in the Shangqing Palace, he was not strong enough. In order to protect him, Wei Zhentian was burned to death by Wei Zhentian's inextinguishable flames. Now it was finally resurrected. Wei Zhentian happily hugged Yixian's face and intimately rubbed against it. Here, I'll give you something to eat. Yixian took out an ore from his universe ring. Wei Zhentian did not say anything and directly swallowed it. Back then, Wei Zhentian was only a divine beast at the spirit stage. However, after swallowing this ore, its level rapidly increased. Spirit stage. Void God stage. Void God stage King. Void God stage Emperor. Sovereign Sacred Beast. In just a few breaths' time, Wei Zhentian had become a supreme sacred beast. After all, this ore was a material that could be used to forge a high-grade supreme divine weapon. A single piece of ore was enough for Wei Zhentian to reach the 6th grade supreme divine beast level. One had to know that the beast god bloodline had a 40% increase in monster growth. However, one piece was not enough for Wei Zhentian. I'll give you all the ores but not this blood rock. Yixian took out all the ores so that Wei Zhentian could eat his fill. Yixian also noticed that after reviving, Wei Zhentian's speed of refining ores wasn't just a little bit faster. Could it be that something strange had happened? He glanced at the interface and realized that Wei Zhentian was no longer an earth spirit. Instead, he was called Earth Monarch. Sure enough, there was a change. However, Wei Zhentian's mutation did not cause the beast god bloodline to mutate like Luo did. Soon Wei Zhentian had swallowed all the ores. After transforming from an earth spirit to an earth monarch, his refining speed was shockingly fast. In just a few breaths' time, he had become a 8th grade supreme sacred beast. What a cute rock. Young master, what is it? Luo grabbed Wei Zhentian. Yixian quickly explained. Earth monarch? I never thought that an earth spirit could mutate. Can it fight? Luo asked curiously. Before Yixian could speak, Wei Zhentian, who had fallen into Luo's hand, suddenly turned into a small storm and rapidly expanded. Then, it turned into a green heavenly dragon. Roar! Wei Zhentian roared at the sky. Wow, it looks so powerful. Luo's beautiful eyes were wide open. She also wished that she could have such an ability. Unfortunately, she was only a three-tailed fox. After the monster system is upgraded, I can still upgrade monsters. However, it requires a lot of devour points. Where am I supposed to find a devourer monster? Yixian was helpless. Wei Zhentian's mutation should be an upgrade from an earth spirit to an earth monarch. However, after Luo Luo's mutation, the monster system panel showed a question mark. It was obvious that Luo Luo's bloodline was much more noble than Wei Zhentian's earth monarch. While Wei Zhentian and Luo Luo were playing, Yixian placed his attention on the newly activated mission system and treasure system. The mission system was similar to the training hall in the sect. As long as one completed the mission, one would be able to obtain some benefits. Some rewards could not be bought through the exchange system. However, the normal mission rewards were naturally not that good. Other than the normal missions, there was also a type of random mission. This type of random mission could only be triggered under certain circumstances. After completing it, the rewards would be very generous. Random mission can possibly reward devour points? Yixian's eyes lit up. The original devour system was called advancement points. It could only be used to upgrade bloodlines. After the upgrade, it was called devour points. Other than upgrading bloodlines, it could also be used to exchange for items and upgrade monsters. Yixian did not expect that he would be able to directly complete the random mission and obtain devour points. This was awesome. However, the random mission only had a few lines of explanation. It did not say where or how to trigger it. It was considered a random encounter. As for the newly activated treasure system, Yixian did not know much about it. He quickly took a look. Ding, the host can now refine the treasure Sky Quake sword. The treasure material is the Shadowless sword. With Wei Zhentian as the weapon spirit, the compatibility is 100%. Do you want to refine it? When Yixian looked over, the system notification sounded. With Wei Zhentian as the weapon spirit? Yixian was stunned. He quickly looked at the system's explanation. The treasure system required a weapon spirit and a weapon spirit. The weapon spirit could be a weapon or something else. As for the weapon spirit, it must be something with self-consciousness. For example, Wei Zhentian. The treasure can be strengthened without limit. As long as the host does not die, the treasure will not be destroyed. After Yixian finished reading, he could not help but swallow his saliva. Unlimited strengthening meant that the treasure could grow like Wei Zhentian. However, as long as the host did not die, the treasure would not be destroyed. If I let Wei Zhentian be the weapon spirit, as long as my three bodies do not die, Wei Zhentian will not die? That was Yixian's understanding. At that moment, Yixian called Wei Zhentian over and asked about it. The master and the weapon spirit were telepathic. Although Wei Zhentian could not speak, it agreed. Okay. Then I will refine you into a treasure. Yixian nodded and kept Wei Zhentian. Ding, begin refining treasure. Ding, the treasure Sky Quake sword has been successfully refined. Chapter 935. The Sky Quake sword was a light green longsword. Its body was translucent and emitted a faint green light. It was similar to the Wind Dragon Slash that Yixian once obtained. Without waiting for Yixian to speak, the Sky Quake sword suddenly disintegrated and turned into a green rock. Wei Zhentian. Haha, I've refined Wei Zhentian into a sword. Yixian looked at Wei Zhentian in his hand and with a thought, he turned it back into the Sky Quake sword. The Sky Quake sword was now Yixian's treasure. As long as Yixian didn't die, Wei Zhentian wouldn't die and could be considered invincible. Yixian quickly glanced at the panel and discovered that Wei Zhentian's realm had been forcefully raised to a transcendent sacred beast. After all, the Sky Quake sword's material, the Shadowless sword, was a supreme spiritual treasure. From now on, Yixian could use ores and other items to strengthen the Sky Quake sword. At the same time, Wei Zhentian's realm would also increase. After forging Wei Zhentian into the Heaven-Shaking sword, Yixian discovered that there was actually another skill in the Heaven-Shaking sword. 10,000 swords returned to origin. This 10,000 swords returned to origin could only be used once a day. It seemed to be a very powerful skill. However, although the name was 10,000 swords, there were only 100 swords. Immediately, Yixian stood up and threw the Sky Quake sword in his hand. 10,000 swords returned to origin. In an instant, the Sky Quake sword split into 100 Sky Quake swords and danced in the air like lightning. If there was an enemy inside, they would be instantly shredded into pieces. If I had used this move when I was fighting against the retired emperor, I'm afraid he would have been shredded into pieces by the 10,000 swords returned to origin. Yi Xian looked at the 100 sky quake swords dancing in the air and thought again. Spiritual sword array. In the next moment, the 100 sky quake swords circling in the air above the palace quickly enlarged and turned into giant swords. Bang! 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 One by one, enormous swords that shook the heavens suddenly descended and pierced into the surroundings of Yi Xian. Over 100 enormous swords that shook the heavens directly surrounded Yi Xian, leaving no room for escape. This was the spiritual sword array, a defensive technique. Yi Xian looked around at the spiritual sword array that not even an ant could enter. He immediately clapped and cheered. Very good. Wei Zhentian, return to your original form. Yi Xian was very satisfied. Immediately, the heaven-shaking giant swords disappeared one by one, leaving behind only the heaven-shaking sword. Next, the skyquake sword transformed again. Following Wei Zhentian's will, it transformed into a green pony. Young master, you're so powerful now. If you were this powerful a few days ago, we wouldn't have to fight so intensely. Luolua's eyes lit up as she praised. Yi Xian nodded in agreement. However, if his devouring system had been upgraded that day, he wouldn't even need to use the 10,000 returning swords. He could just rely on his bloodline to deal with the retired emperor. After all, after the devouring system was upgraded, all of his bloodlines had advanced once. By now, Yi Xian had already experienced both the upgraded and newly unlocked systems. However, there was still a system that had yet to be unlocked that attracted Yi Xian's attention. The bloodline fusion system. The host is still missing a battle bloodline. It is unable to be unlocked. This was the reason why the bloodline fusion system had yet to be unlocked. After Yi Xian saw it, his eyes lit up again. Now he already had 5 bloodlines. The Sword God bloodline, the Beast God bloodline, the Divine Tree of Life bloodline, the Gemini bloodline, and the Heavenly Eye Clan bloodline. He had 2 Constitution bloodlines and 2 support bloodlines. However, he was still missing a battle bloodline. It seemed that the bloodline fusion system could only be unlocked by having 6 bloodlines in one body. I wonder if I can fuse the battle bloodline with the battle bloodline. Or can I just choose any one of them? Yi Xian didn't understand either, but he knew that the bloodline fusion system must be very powerful. Unfortunately, the battle bloodline wasn't expensive, but the battle bloodline expansion slot was extremely expensive. Yi Xian only hoped to buy the battle bloodline expansion slot before he reached the 3 sovereign disasters. As for the new battle bloodline, he had already chosen it. After the devouring system was upgraded, the bloodline had also been upgraded. However, he couldn't afford the battle bloodline expansion slot, so he only gave it a cursory glance. Now that the devouring system had been upgraded, Yi Xian couldn't just sit there and do nothing. Luoluo hadn't broken through to the mid-stage 9th sovereign realm, so Yi Xian wanted to take this opportunity to visit the other high-grade holy empires. Luoluo, I'm going out for a while, Yi Xian said to Wei Zhentian, who was playing with him. Luoluo replied softly. Only Yi Xian's main body went out. His first clone was still here to comprehend the sword-shaped stone. If Yi Xian's main body was in danger, he could immediately send Luoluo and Wei Zhentian into the storage space and let his main body out. However, Yi Xian could be considered to be invincible in the Blood Cliff continent. There were a total of 4 holy empires in the Blood Cliff continent. Other than the Royal Sacred Dynasty, there were 3 more. This time, Yi Xian's target was the Cyan Feather Holy Dynasty, which was the closest to the Royal Sacred Dynasty. In terms of strength, the Cyan Feather Holy Dynasty couldn't be compared to the Royal Sacred Dynasty. However, the treasures in the Cyan Feather Holy Dynasty's treasury were definitely more than the Royal Sacred Dynasty's. Yi Xian rushed at full speed. In just 5 days, he had already reached the imperial capital of the Cyan Feather Holy Dynasty from the Royal Sacred Dynasty. The emperor of the Cyan Feather Holy Dynasty was also a peak 9th supreme being. There was also an expert in the imperial capital who had passed human body disaster. With my current strength, I can directly kill my way in. There is no need to use the Eye of Control. However, it's better to be safe. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and directly arrived outside the imperial capital. Without waiting for the imperial capital's general to speak, Yi Xian directly controlled him. Lord, please enter. The imperial capital's general directly led Yixian in. The soldiers guarding the imperial capital were also very surprised. They had been guarding the imperial capital for so long, but this was the first time they saw Yixian. However, they didn't dare to ask too much. After successfully entering the imperial capital, Yixian directly said, "Bring me to your emperor." "Yes," the imperial capital's general respectfully replied. With him leading the way, Yixian didn't need to look for the emperor himself. Soon he arrived at the emperor's court. In a dignified and luxurious hall, one official after another respectfully bowed. A middle-aged man sat on the dragon throne. He was the emperor of the Cyan Feather Holy Dynasty. However, Yixian just directly walked in. "General Hong, who is he?" When the emperor saw the imperial capital's general, he was very surprised and asked. It was time for the imperial capital's court. What was the imperial capital's general doing here instead of guarding the imperial capital? Yixian was too lazy to talk nonsense. He directly used the Eye of Control on the emperor. The Heavenly Eye clan's bloodline had been upgraded twice by the advancement points. After the Devouring system was upgraded,